Okay, I'm just giving a second because it takes people time to connect. All right, I'm going to call our meeting to order. Today is August 29th, 2020. This is a special meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Glassbach?
Here.
Mrs. Hildebrand?
Here.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Mather?
Here.
Mrs. Schott?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
And Joe
of
Gento.
America and to the republic for which it
Thank you.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Ms. Healy, I think, is that your sound in the background? Because I'm
Yes,
hearing.
I will turn that off.
Thanks, sorry. And you do your sound check and make sure it's working. Okay, so next we have presentations and recognitions. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Roget.
Hey, Mr. Waterman, would you mind putting the high school presentation up first, please? Can you go to the presentation slides, please? Under view. Excuse me, go to slideshow and then from beginning. Thank you. So, good morning everyone, and thank you for attending today. Actually, Mr. Waterman, you have the wrong one. I need the high school one, please. Can you go from the beginning? Thank you. So again, good morning everyone. Dr. Morse and I are going to begin with a presentation about the high school schedule, and I will follow up with a presentation about, the Distance Learning Academy. I just want to take the edge off from everything and let you know that this high school presentation will include some adjustments to where we have been, and that my proposal to the school committee will not include moving students from Forest Park. So I know a lot of people have tuned in with those concerns. I will go through my whole rationale as to what proposals I am making, and so please keep with us and hear through the process. And for those of you who are tuning in right now who were not at our last meeting, I'll make sure that I at least summarize some of the points from that previous meeting. So Dr. Morse is going to join me in this presentation right now. Mr. Waterman, can I get the next slide, please? So the first question a lot of people have is, can the high school, go to a full, every day, all high school students? And we simply do not have the transportation capacity for doing this, and this is by the Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines. If we go to all students, we also lose all of the, or at least half of the capacity that we have for student parking right now. So a number of things have worked in our benefit in terms of transportation, including increased capacity on buses, the 50-50 schedule at the high school. We have recently moved the Davisville time back to 8 o'clock. So our schedule right now would include Wickford and high school students coming in at the same time. In most cases, if not in every one, Wickford students would come on separate buses than the high school, and we can make that work. And then the second tier now would keep Hamilton at 8 o'clock, but it would also include Davisville. And again, because of those changes that we've recently learned about and recently plugged into the system, we can make that kind of a schedule work. But going every day to school for everybody at the high school simply would not work on that item alone, but there's also a couple of others. We would have major social distancing issues at all passing times and in classes. And so our classrooms are set up right now with, compliance with RIDE, Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines. They would not be if everybody were in, and particularly the passing time piece. When people are coming into the school, leaving the school, or changing classes, there is zero social distancing in those hallways, and that would be a major problem. And it would also create too many obstacles for social distancing and staffing during lunch. So, as you know, that is a time when, in a traditional setting, you're looking at 300 students at a time, something in that range, going to a cafeteria. In this case, we would probably need to utilize some of our classrooms, so some of the classrooms could not be used for regular instruction at the time. We need to modify the schedule. We would probably need to utilize the gym and probably other areas as well. And we would need to probably hire a number of staff to supervise that whole process. Next slide, please. So the expectations that we have for distance learning, and I'll start here, but Dr. Morse, if you want to jump in. Our students will be learning remotely. They will follow the bell schedule for attending classes. Attendance will be taken in each class during the class time. Students will be scheduled by the teacher. Each day is a learning day, following regular course sequence and new content every day. And academic rigor is in place. Students must adhere to daily due dates. In the spring, we were very forgiving because of the unique circumstances going on. At this point, every student is coming in, into the building every other day, has that kind of contact that they need with their teachers. And so those kinds of forgiving would not be happening anymore. Dr. Morse, you want to add to that at all?
It does that we think it's really important that we make sure the students are following the bell schedule, whether they're at home every other day or home every day. If at any point we have to pivot to hopefully every student being able to come in every day, or unfortunately every kid having to stay home every day, it's important that we adhere to that schedule so that students are ready to make that shift.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Dr. Morris, do you want to handle this slide?
So the daily schedule meetings, we needed to build the time for that social emotional check-in. And we need to, if they're picking up that they have anxiety or stress or something's going on, we need to be able to get them to their resources early in the day. I don't want to wait until the third or fourth period to take your kid is in trouble. So a schedule that could be adjusted for the transition between in-person and distance learning. So, but as I was saying before, that the pivoting, we need to go having the food service for students, especially free and reduced, whether we're served at food service every day. A lot of students depend on us for that, so we want to make sure that they have that in some formats. Provide for contractual items that improve curriculum and assessment. So we need to be keeping up our CPT times, or the things that the teachers need to keep those common assessments, those common frameworks to make sure that all students are getting the curriculum. Each class period must be equal to the others. That's pretty important as far as instructional minutes go. If you have one class that's getting way too many minutes, they get out of alignment, and that goes to the bullet point above. We try to keep the students on pace so that everybody gets the curriculum. And to the extent possible, time to check in with students who are distance learning. So we're hoping for that, and whichever format we go with, we're going to do our best to check in, whether you're home every other day or every day. It's important to keep track of those students and to hear how their learning is going and how their social emotional needs are going. So the four-course split option. The pros of the four-course split option, we're talking about all of your course being in one semester or the other semester. It offers the least exposure risk for students. Your students are going to 3 classes or 4 classes as opposed to 8 classes. Obviously, 8 classes or 7 classes is a lot more exposure to other students than if they're going to 3 or 4 classes. More frequent in-person contact with the teacher every other day for a total of 10 classes with the same teacher. Day out, day in, with the same teachers. So you're in contact with the same teachers every day, in person every other day. As I said before, students struggle because of the con of the gap that I'm going to address in a second. The students who are most at risk for that backslide during the gap, we already have programs every day. We have a couple of courses such as algebra, that's already in the reform that will change. Students who are supposed to be staying for a year. Every course is 90 days for a year long course. So it's a matter of spreading your 90 days over the whole year or uploading your 90 days at the beginning of the year. It's still the same among instructional days. It's the least exposure for the teachers. I'm concerned about my staff being out. We're talking about trying to hire teachers to cover distance learning or to cover teachers who are over those who are going to be out. So if that increases the illness, we've got left and an option of finishing up with
Slide, please.
So the 8 period option. The pros of the 8 period option are they avoid those gaps in skill retention and, again, the AP test. So you can see that pretty much the pros of one become the cons of the other. The cons for this is the in-person learning with the teacher is every 4th day. So you'd see your teacher 5 times a month instead of 10 times a month for any given course when it's in person. Create exposure risk for students. The exposures are much higher for students in the 8 period than it is for the 4 period. And greater exposure risk for teachers. So once you figure out what your mainframe master schedule looks like, it's like building the house and then you figure out what furniture you're going to move into it. So on this daily schedule, once we have the framework, this daily schedule works whichever option we do. But, option one, if they come in at 7:15 in the morning till 12 o'clock, we still have the AD schedule, and this includes new classes every day for all students in distance learning, have choice to live stream lessons, provide recordings of live lessons, or create alternate lessons to best suit the needs of the distance learners. That goes across all of these schedules. That's the main schedule. Option one, if you go 7:15 to noon time, you have 4 60-minute classes. It allows up to 75 minutes for teachers at the end of the day to check in with distance learners. Unfortunately, that's different than the pre-normal pandemic schedule, where students had longer class periods of about 80 minutes. Students receive a grab-and-go lunch at the exit of the school day. Option two, if we were to go from 7:15 to 1 o'clock, my biggest concern with this was that's a long time for students to go. If you could see our high school students, most of them can't wait till their 10:30 lunch. And I know that seems early to everybody, but you have to think about what time these kids are getting here at 7:15 in the morning. So for a teenager, they like to have their iced coffee. They wait till that 10:30 lunchtime, 11 o'clock. So by expanding that time, we have 3 74-minute classes and build in an 83-minute class to accommodate a breakfast break. This gives them a time to get that nourishment so they're not starving and they can hold off till 1 o'clock for their lunch. The transportation will still work, even with the increased bus capacity and self-transports that we put into place. Transportation will work because we've got that AD split of students, half the students in the building. It allows for only 15 minutes of distant learning check-in at the end of the day. So that's that piece we talked about that we wanted to look at the beginning, about students having time to ask teachers questions about the material. At the end of the day, the kids who are totally distance learning, having a little extra time for that emotional check-in, that we don't have them in front of us for advisory, those kinds of things. Breakfast may incur expense depending on the federal government reimbursement. And option number 3 is the all-day scenario. So this is where 7:15 to 1:45, we would have to serve lunch. We serve lunch during period 3, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, lunch comes at 3. Period 3 would have to be extended significantly to allow for lunch periods and cleanings. So we have been advised that in order to clean the cafeteria, adequately following the protocols, it's a 15-minute minimum protocol to clean the tables and the bathrooms in between the lunches. This balloons period 3 significantly, and I'll show you a sample schedule in 1 second. So period 3 would be ballooned to about 92, 97 minutes compared to all the other classes, which we could get back to their normal 80 minutes. Transportation would still work. However, there's no distance learning check-in at the end of the day. It's going to involve increased staff and expenses needed to supervise the lunches. We would need 5 more cafeteria staff to serve these lunches, and I've been told there aren't many applicants for that. And more time for cafeteria cleaning between the lunches, as I mentioned before. In addition, because of the restrictions of the size of the number of students we can put into the cafeteria with social distancing, we would have to utilize other areas of the building in addition to the cafeteria for lunch. So there'd be the lunchroom, only a few seniors would be allowed, probably about 10 on senior row, and the rest would be in classrooms, and we have to provide supervision for all of those areas for lunch, potentially taking all of your administrators offline for a period of 2 hours, not being able to deal with other things going on in the building. And then we would have to use gymnasiums and those kinds of things in other places. So this is an example of a full day schedule. And what you see in that yellow piece is the ballooning of period 3 to allow for that cleaning time. The 92 minutes, a lot of people look at this and say, why is 92 minutes for 2 of them, 97 minutes for the others? Because you need passing time. So the students coming into first lunch have that general passing time that everybody has between periods 2 and 3. But then they need an additional passing time between first and second lunch. So to go from the lunchroom to their classroom, now you've got another passing time for them. Same thing happens between 2 and 3, and 3 and 4. The fourth period, when they get out of lunch, they're going directly to their fourth lunch goes directly to their fourth period class. So again, that general passing time. What happens when you mess with this yellow zone is anything you do to one affects all of them. So you might think you're changing one by a minute and you're changing all of it by 3 or 4 minutes. And it tends to shrink from the top to bottom. It shrinks together. So you try to change one and it changes something every period before. Now it's longer because you're getting out of lunch quicker. So it's a very complicated process. Mr. Hess, you could just a minute or two to get that, but if it's not, it's supposed to be 97 minutes instruction. So, serving lunch, the requirements of serving lunch. We can, by social distancing guidelines right now, we can fit a maximum of 125 people in the cafeteria for lunch. Maintaining 6 feet of distance with no students facing each other, you don't want people face to face with their masks off eating lunch, means that we need to put 125 individual desks into that cafeteria, and the cleaning time would actually increase because now you've got individual desks, individual chairs. If we left the seating that we have, most people know the low seating we have with the big large tables, we could fit on those tables 90 students. It would require 6 lunches or 5 lunches, depending on how many students we have in the building and how many students we're fitting in the cafeteria. We think we can do it with the 4 lunches. If we move students around the building using classrooms, gymnasiums, anywhere we can put students alternatively to the cafeteria for lunch. Equal class periods cannot be created because of the required cleaning time in the lunch period. This model would require additional staffing, and a lot of these things I've said before in the previous slide. This require additional cost for supervision for multiple locations, require additional time for sanitation, and lunch options would be limited to pre-packaged box lunches. Students would not be seeing the hot lunches that they normally see. It's got to be pre-packaged, individually wrapped items, grab and go. So, alternatives to serving lunch if the school day is extended to 1 p.m. Students can pick up a grab-and-go power breakfast in the morning. This power breakfast will include a power bar for later in the morning. This is students that want to for the in-building food service. So as I said before, if you're here for lunch, you're getting a cold grab-and-go packaged lunch. If you're grabbing it to go home, we can provide students with a frozen lunch that they can reheat in the microwave when they get home. The added staffing for food service is not required because they're not doing that cafeteria service, in-person service, going through the lines, all that. And time in the building will be dedicated to class time rather than lunch and cleaning time. So although we're extending from 1, if you extend from 1 o'clock to 1:45, you also have your lunch period in it. So you're not gaining 45 minutes of instructional time in there because you have to build in your lunch time. The building, time in the building will be dedicated, as I said, sorry, repeating that part, plus gain about 14 minutes for the added hour.
So thank you, Dr. Morse. So given all of the parameters that Dr. Morse laid out, my recommendation to the school committee would be to implement option 2. This would be a 4x4 schedule. It would have 74-minute classes. It would have the 1 p.m. dismissal, which adds an hour onto the in-person time, roughly about 14 minutes per class period. It would be, the in-person and distance learning students engage in new lessons daily. I know that's been a question for a lot of people. Everyone is getting a new lesson daily. We were organized in order to compensate for the loss of that, scheduled hour or so that the teachers could engage with students online. we will organize a very robust virtual academic resource center. That's something we've always had at the high school, kind of an after-school program where people can get additional tutoring as needed. This will be a virtual item, and we will staff it, as needed. If we find that a lot of students need to take advantage of this, we will staff it, as appropriately. We also, and Dr. Moore, you can talk a little bit about this, but AP offers, seminar clubs, which we will take advantage of. This is a year-round thing, and it will support students who, their course may be one way or another, not quite in sync with the way the test is, in timing with the test. Dr. Moore, do you have any more to add on that?
Yes, so the AP organization, the College Board, has recognized this is a national problem. AP is a national test, it's a national problem. They changed the testing last spring in response to that, and they've been changing a lot of the things they are doing. They're not unresponsive to the fact that schools are struggling with their instructional models this year in the pandemic, and they are changing accordingly. They are putting out, they have a YouTube channel called the College Board YouTube channel. They have instructional videos for every unit of every AP course that students can use as reference to either those students whose families are homeschooling can use them. The schools can utilize them for instructional purposes. We can utilize those for supporting. And I think the added benefit for us is that our AP teachers are willing to be the club advisors so that the students have a person to ask questions of instead of being left totally on their own like a homeschool student would be.
So thank you. One last thing I want to point out, a number of people have asked me, I know that St. Eric and South Kingston Town, maybe doing a full in high school schedule, and how come we can't? I just point out that every district is very different in terms of logistics, the number of kids they have in a high school, and lots of other variables, how many buses they have, the size of their town, so on and so forth. In my conversations with the Department of Education, they have laid out for me that at least 50% of our high schools in Rhode Island are adopting an AP schedule similar to ours, day on, day off. And since they've given me that information, some of those schools, like places like Cumberland, Pawtucket, Warwick, have all declared that they're going full distance learning, at least to start. So, we're not alone in this. There are even neighboring communities to us that have a similar, AAP schedule in that respect. So, that's the first part of my presentation, Distance Learning Academy, please. And thank you again, Dr. Morse, for your help. So, if you can go to the second slide, Mike. So right now we are looking at roughly 800 students district-wide that have, asked us to, go full distance learning. That's a commitment for the first semester. Given that our district is about 4,000 students, that's about 20% of our students right now. And by the way, I'll mention this again later, but we are going to keep this request option open until Monday at noon. We have our first professional day on Tuesday, and we have our job placement program Monday at 3. So that is absolutely the last minute we can have this data to know exactly, what kinds of, classes we are going to be offering and we're going to support our staff. So right now we have, I think it's, 300 is probably actually a little bit more than that now, because we have, if you've been told you're on the waiting list for elementary distance learning, we have put you into that, and we will notify you of that very soon. So there's over 300 students in the elementary, and that right now equals 16 elementary distance learning classrooms. It looks like there's still room in those classes if we have more people selected, but I can't guarantee that if a lot more people select it, we may not have to go to a 17th or 18th class. And the problem comes with the fact that right now we have, and this happens every year, we get to August and we know we're going to need all the teachers that we have, but there are a couple of them that we're looking to see where the enrollment comes. Do we need an extra class at school A, or are we going to need an extra class at school B? So we have FTEs, full teacher equivalent of, and full-time equivalent. And so we have 3 people right now, and we have 16 jobs to fill. Next, Mike. So on the 25th, I put together 3 options for the committee. And the first option would be that the district, Mike, there we go, thank you. So the first option would be that the district would be looking to hire 13 new people to cover these positions. And that, of course, is a lot of money. 13 new staff is something that we obviously don't typically do from year to year. In any given year, we may be looking at the addition of, one to maybe 3 or 4 at most staff members, or it could be a similar reduction depending on what we need. So this is huge. It's especially huge given the economic climate right now, the fact that the district does not have its state aid number, but figures we will probably go down in that. We don't know yet from the federal government. In April, we talked to the town council, and there was a lot of funding we were hoping to get there. That didn't occur either. So when people say, is this all about money? Unfortunately, there is an element to this that is about the funding. If we can't fund that, then unfortunately, we may not be able to do it, or we may not be able to do a lot of other things that people have come to expect of their school department and really value. So it is a difficult decision to have. If we take option 2 that I presented the other day, it means that 9 of those 13 teachers that we need come from existing classrooms. And that means that, just to give you an example of how this could work, if I have a grade level at a school, say it's grade 5 at Hamilton, and there are 3 sections and there are 60 kids, and right now there's 20 students in each of those 3 classrooms. If 10 of those students decide that they're going to go distance learning, and the district decides that because now one of those classes is at 10, I can put the 10 students in the other 2 rooms and utilize that teacher as a distance learning teacher. We don't spend any money, but the remaining 2 rooms now went from a capacity of 25 in the room, or not a capacity, but 25 students that are enrolled in the room, to 25. And in a time where we're looking to create more space between students, that doesn't feel right. So that's a difficult item. And that alone that item, even just hiring 4 people, could be in a range of, as much as $300,000. So the temporary relocation of Forest Park, I realize that is a lot to take, and trust me, I want you all to know I received a lot of emails about that. I appreciate that, and I know the school committee has too, and that's one of the reasons why we put this meeting a couple of days later. We wanted to hear from the community, and we certainly have. It is not a popular idea with the Forest Park community. I get that. That option, however, is the one option that means that we can do it with our current funding, and it means that for a temporary 1 year only, we would have all the staff that we need. Most of the Forest Park students would be still together, and we would also be able to gain some other staff increases in places where we need them, like having an extra nurse available to us where it's needed, or an administrator to cover the distance learning school, which at this point would be a bigger school than what Forest Park or the Fishing Cove is on a typical year. So those are concerns that we have to make sure that this works. Now, we are very happy that we have an agreement with our teachers union to do the distance learning classrooms this way with elementary. We feel that at the middle and high school, students are more capable of, if they need to be distance learning, that they can engage with their teacher and how to follow the class. In the elementary, it just seems like all the more a problematic piece to be giving your full focus to the students in the room and the students at home at the same time. So we created this, but we knew that this could incur an expense. So we are looking at the addition of, as we move into this, hiring teachers and using long-term subs as much as we possibly can to make this work. So the next slide, please. So what I am proposing to the school committee is that we do kind of a combination of 1, 2, and 3. And that combination does not include the relocation of Forest Park students. That we would transfer existing district resources and hire one-year elementary classroom teachers and additional short-term district-wide health and social emotional support capabilities. So we would be looking to have, some funding to be able to take care of these needs. I cannot guarantee that for the money I'm looking to attain here, that we would necessarily do outright hires all the way, but I would certainly be looking to maintain elementary classroom sizes that are under 20 wherever I can. That's not a guarantee that it will work out everywhere, but I think that that is a workable solution, and is certainly better than doing what is just purely the option 2 on the board, where there will be a number of elementary classrooms that would be as high as 25 and even 26 in some cases. This would also give us administrative control of the Distance Learning Academy, given the size. It would allow us, as much as possible to reduce, any excessive class size where we see it. If there's one spot, one grade level at one school where it's a lot of capacity, we can try to plug that hole, add a person in that spot with a transfer from somewhere else to make it so that across the board we have, we don't have one place where there are, 25 and 26 in a row and another place where there's like 12 and 13. That we would do our best to balance this out around the district, still cover the distance learning classrooms that we need. And my proposal here is to, help us, just to give us the funding that we need so we can address whatever we need for district staffing, regardless of the declared reopening scenarios. Next slide, please. So what I'm looking for is approximately $1 million in additional funds. And I'm asking that the school committee, look to the school capital reserve fund, and find $500,000 there, and that we also include a request to the town for the other $500,000. This is a very unique situation. It's a situation, these funds, as we mentioned, for any of you who have been engaged in budgeting processes over the year, capital reserve or fund balance money that we have is typically funds that we want to save for one-time items. If I need a teacher, for instance, and I expect that I'm going to need them on a regular basis going forward, it's not something that we would use this funding for because it's not going to be renewed in next year's budget. So we need to be mindful. But given the circumstances, we certainly do have, hopefully, what will be a one-time need. And that's the way I feel we can find what we need. So this will include hiring people. It will include some movement of people from in-school classes to distance learning classes where we are able to do so without making a spike at any one school or grade level. And it will give some allowance to the district to, pay for, additional part-time administrator to help with the oversight of the distance learning, and possibly, where we need in terms of special education, social emotional support, even some clerical. So, just kind of, we were not absolutely certain across the board what those needs will be, and as we move forward, those may change, as everything else seems to have over this summer. So, so I feel like having that funding available will give us the opportunity to take care of all these needs. And if it turns out that the town council funding is not approved, that I would then propose to the school department, $500,000 in cuts in other areas. That absolutely will not be easy, but because this is the more pressing need at the moment, we will do everything we can to make that work. And that is my presentation, Mr. Glasgow. If I could just add one thing. So I have a number of emails. I just want to point out, people have mentioned to me that they feel like that I've had this long-term plan to close Forest Park. I have had a plan that I put forward, and there's nothing secret about it. I made a fully public presentation to the school committee and town council about a long-range plan to build a new middle school. And that included either a major revision at Forest Park or consolidating of our elementary schools, with potentially Forest Park being the one that we close because it's one of the oldest and doesn't have a gymnasium like other schools do. So that plan would be at least 7 to 10 years out in good conditions. Considering the economy we're in now, I would expect if that plan ever gets any momentum at all from future town councils and future school committees, that it will probably take a heck of a lot longer for that to happen. And that may or may not include the closure of any elementary school. So those two things are absolutely not related. The Forest Park temporary movement of students had to do purely with learning about our distance learning cadre of students. That we found that the enrollment at Quidnesset and Forest Park were the two lowest, which was also low, that you would not even get to nearly the capacity of Quidnesset in particular, because it's got a larger capacity. So that was the impetus of that idea. It was literally something that we put together in about 48 hours, because that was the time between that school committee meeting and our learning of the number of students for distance learning. So I just want to be clear about that. And anyway, Mr. Glasgow, I'll give it to you now.
Okay, thank you. So I want to give each of the members an opportunity to comment or talk here, but I'm just going to sort of start with some thoughts of my own here. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank everybody who's called and emailed to each of us. We have gotten a tremendous number of emails. What really shows is the strong of the community that we have here in North Kingstown, that people are engaged, active, and taking part in the process. And I want to thank each and every one of you who wrote to us. Normally, I try to answer every single email that I receive. I have to apologize to people. I was not able to do that this week, just to the sheer volume of them. However, I can tell you myself that I have been one of them. I could. And I also want to thank Dr. Boucher, some of the social media commentary and some of the emails with hopefully even staying. It's administration brought with all the options, and I think for a lot of that's what the back. So.
Mr. Glasgow, we have found that sometimes when folks shut their video off, they have more luck when they start doing that funny Zoom window.
Can you hear me now? Okay, folks, I am so sorry about that. My computer just suddenly said you have no audio. All right, so I was just saying that, we have a responsibility to look at all of the options. Whatever scenario we choose on all of these things, whether we're talking about how we're doing our distance learning and how we are doing our schedule to high school and all of the things that we're doing, there is no way that we're going to please everyone. We can within a set of extremely restrictive parameters that have been sent to us by the Department of Education and the Department of Health. This is not what any of us want to see. What we all want to see is back to normal, kids in school like we used to have, and we're all hoping and praying that that happens as soon as we possibly can do it. And when these parameters change, we'll be looking to adjust to bring things back as much as we can. And likewise, unfortunately, if the opposite occurs, to go in the other direction if we need to. And a lot of that is dictated to us by the state. And I also want to thank, all of you that are here to support Forest Park. And I wanted to let people know that I am not supporting any option that includes a temporary closure of that school. I can speak for myself. I haven't talked to the other members. We're not allowed to do that, so I don't know what everyone else thinks. But I, for one, can tell you that that is not an option that I'm going to be voting for tonight. Next, I wanted to give each member, if they'd like to, an opportunity to comment, and would somebody else like to speak at this point? Ms. Hoskins, I see your hand up.
Well, for all the emails, I responded to many of them. As a parent of a child who chose to transfer to Hamilton with the redistricting last year, I know how emotionally tough it was. We had months to prepare, and it was still a roller coaster. Now you add a pandemic to the mix, requiring masks to be worn. That being said, I'm really glad the superintendent is not recommending it, because as it stood, I would not have voted for it.
Thank you. Anyone else? I can't see you, sorry. Okay, the school committee members, you can talk on
If I can echo Dr. O'Shea and Greg and Jenny, we have received hundreds of emails, that's not exaggerating at all, of emails, and your voices have come through very loud and very clear. I agree that option 3 is flawed. It doesn't take into account a lot of things, including our kids' social and emotional well-being. And I think it focuses, as Dr. O'Shea said, that it focuses on pure budget numbers, and it doesn't really address what our kids really need, and that's to be safe. And if we have to return to in-person learning, it should be our goal to minimize the number of students and staff in all of our buildings. And that option 3 doesn't accomplish that. It really does the opposite. So again, I haven't had this conversation with anybody else on the school committee, but I will not vote for option 3. And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you. Any other members? And by the way, I do see Joe Ventipus, Sally Schott, that you want to have an opportunity to speak. I'm just going to do our members first, and then I'll get to you folks.
Thank you. No,
Lisa, start.
same as everybody else. I mean, I think we're all, it sounds like, sort of in the same place without speaking with each other, which is a good thing. I definitely want to thank Dr. O'Shea and his team for kind of going back to the drawing board and trying to figure out if there was a way to combine some of these options together and create what might not be a perfect solution, but is something that we can work with to allow the children of Forest Park and the teachers to stay where they are and still provide high quality education for our Distance Learning Academy children. So thank you to everybody. This was a very challenging couple of days for all of us, and I'm optimistic that we will be able to make this work. So thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I won't elaborate on the points already made. Again, I echo what the chair said. Sometimes it's hard on short notice to respond to everyone, but we do read them and take those comments very seriously. I would echo what Dr. O'Shea said, though, and I appreciate there's a frustration in the community, but the sentiment that last minute plans or, waiting till after people decide, well, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. If 95% of parents on the survey had indicated they wanted in-person education, I'm sure Dr. Ojea would have had to come up with a revised plan on the elementary schools. And that would cause a lot of frustration in the community. If 80% of the community came back and said they wanted a distance, fully distance, we probably would have an option for every student every day at the high school because the numbers would be within the governor's guidance. So again, it's sometimes getting the input from the community drives plans. And while I fully appreciate and echo the other members that I do not support option 3, closing Forest Park, I think you have to remember that the administration has the due diligence to work through different options. When the governor tells us to be creative, I sort of get frustrated when she thinks that means put our kids in tents. Coming up with an option like Dr. Ojea did, at least is trying to honor that part of being creative, and then going beyond and taking the input that he received from school committee members and from the community and other stakeholders and coming up with a different option. So I would just point that out. I would also appreciate the work the administration has done to extend the instructional day at the high school. I think that was an important element that we can add. It's all about, to me, instructional time, so if we can add instructional time there with minimal cost. I know, again, that everyone would like to see everyone every day at that building, but I would again remind the community that it's not due to a lack of creativity. It's due to the fact that the state has put certain restrictions on us that they will not come off of yet. And until they do so, we cannot get everyone back in at that school. But again, having said that, I appreciate the work everyone's done, the input. I used to say, I remember the full day K discussion. I think that got a couple hundred. I used to say cut a librarian or the language program or sports might get a few people. It's actually refreshing to see 500, almost 600 people here. I would say this is your first school committee meeting. Look at these, stay involved, not just when there's a major issue like that. Participation from the community really drives making the educational system in the town better. And I would add, I'd also like to support, I think Dr. Ojea, and I don't want to cut him off, he was going to say this, the support we're getting from the town in helping, especially the town manager, the police department, and other officials who are also been very helpful in supporting all the efforts, and whatever plan we eventually adopt, I'm sure they will step up as well to help the district implement.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to mention part of my presentation, I forgot, thank you, Mr. Jones, that we talked with the town manager and he has agreed to help us with police details at all of our schools for at least the first few weeks of school because we anticipate with a lot more people driving in that traffic could be an issue coming in and coming out. So thank you to Town Manager Miles for his support on that. And to the NKPD.
Thanks. Any other members of the school committee? Did we get everybody? 1, 2, 3, 4. So next I want to recognize Sally Schott, our Jamestown representative. So once I find the right button, here we go. You should be able to unmute and speak now.
I think I'm here. Just as Mr. Boswick said, I sit on the board as a non-voting member representing Jamestown. I'm a member of the Jamestown School Committee. And so my issues I only focus on the high school issues. And I think the plan that is being recommended is a very solid plan. My concern is that no one communicated that change to the superintendent or the school committee in Jamestown, and that 1 o'clock end time will not work for our busing schedule. And we have 150 students who attend your high school and who are wonderful participants and contribute greatly to the fabric of the school. And it's, we just need to, I'm focusing mainly on communication right now, because I think that we're all working at the last minute, and I get that, but now we're working at the last minute. So just as long as there's, this doesn't need to be a public discussion, because 553 people on this call are not from Jamestown, but if Dr. Auger, if you would just confer with Dr. Duva, and the conflict is a little convoluted, and I'm sure you understand what it is, so it's a little bit of a challenge to put it on everyone, but if you guys will just communicate, that would be great.
Yeah, I apologize for that, Sally. And Ken Duva, Superintendent Duva of Jamestown, did reach out to me just now in a text message to let me know that. And so I apologize. He and I have been conferring, all summer long on a lot of these details. This week has been a pretty hectic one, and I just forgot that particular piece. So right after this meeting, if that is what we decide, I will be, of course, working with him and trying to figure this out. And if we can help to make that work, we certainly will, obviously. So.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. And thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Vento, I'm going to unmute you as our student representative, and you can make your comment as well here.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for their hard work. I'd like to talk specifically about the high school options for a moment. So the student union reopening team, more specifically, has had the opportunity to discuss our specific reopening desires with the administration over the last few months. Last week, we sent the administration a series of survey results from questionnaires that were sent out to the class of 2021, the class of 2022, and the class of 2023 at the high school on their specific reopening preferences. Notable questions and responses included the following. When asked whether they would like a lunch period included in the high school in-person schedule, 77.9% of respondents said yes. When asked if they believe that NKSD should provide more flexibility to transition between the distance learning option and the in-school learning option throughout the course of the school year, 75.8% of students said yes. More specifically, more students preferred quarterly, monthly, weekly, and even daily flexibility than the semesterly flexibility proposed by the district. Those are just some of the more broad responses from the surveys, which also included questions regarding snacks during school hours, transportation, and overall flexibility. It's my hope that when we do have an established in-person and distance learning plan, those options reflect what our student union reopening team has discussed with the administration and what the student body prefers based on the survey data we provided to the administration, all while maintaining compliance with RIDE and Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've heard from all the members of the school committee, and given what I don't see any support for the Forest Park relocation scenario. So we're coming to citizens' comments. Obviously, don't necessarily go one thing.
Greg, you're breaking up again.
Yay. Any better or?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. All right. If it keeps happening, I'm going to have to figure something out. It's usually fine. I apologize to everyone. Okay, I was saying we have 544 participants in this meeting. If I were to let many of you, we either tomorrow afternoon and evening. It would be 28 hours. I did some quick math. So a couple things that I'd like to ask with respect to citizens' comments and just a couple notes, because this is probably a number of people's first school committee meeting. Citizens' comments are your opportunity to have some the local school committee people for 3 minutes.
But Greg, no, not working.
right, let me see, did that help at all so far? All right, we'll see what happens. Again, folks, I apologize, this is the world of technology. So what I'm saying is, citizens' comments are, if you think your comments, still, okay, we're going to try this again, and then I will try to do increasingly drastic options. You can hear me again? Okay, sorry. One more time. So citizens' comments are your opportunity to have the microphone for up to 3 minutes. We do ask that you please limit your comments and keep them to under 3 minutes to give other people an opportunity to speak. If you are saying something that you've already heard, if you keep your comments particularly brief and say ditto, that kind of thing, that I am supporting what the last person said. With the fact that it looks unlikely, I say beyond unlikely, that we're going to be transferring students from Forest Park, I think most of you can know that if that is the only reason that you're going to speak, I think we're probably okay there. We welcome comments on all the other issues, and at this point, let me just explain how citizens' comments work. So in a Zoom meeting, if you look at your participants tab, there is a button that says raise hand. If you do that, that signals to me that you would like the opportunity to speak, and I will recognize people as we go through. And also, if you are on a phone, which some people are, you press *9 to ask to raise your hand. The other thing I'll point out is all I see is whatever your screen name is set to. So occasionally I'm recognizing iPhone or just initials or created names. So I just can only recognize the name that I see that you've signed in under. So having said that, I'm going to recognize the first person that I see here, and that is the screen name of C. Trask. Are you there?
Yes, sorry, it took me a minute to get permission to unmute. This is Christine Trask at 94 Goldridge Lane. I do want to thank everyone for responding to some of our concern about the instructional time at the high school level, and I appreciate the model that extends some of the instructional time as well as providing the virtual resource support for them. I would say, though, one of our issues still remains, and this has nothing to do with the requirements of the Department of Health or the Department of Education, and that is it sounds like teachers' desire about whether or not it's synchronous or asynchronous on the days the students are not in the high school, even though you said that the students would be mandated to follow the bell schedule and to be there to check in. It says that the teachers still have the option of not having live events for the students during those days. So I'm still concerned about what that will be for the teachers. Also, the fact that the high school students, select their schedule in the spring when they were assuming it was an 8, the typical schedule, and I know that things have changed, but in particular, continuation of things like PLT, maybe things that students want to change in this model, and I hope that there'll be some consideration for whether or not students are going to be able to change their schedule once they find that out. If given this new format, it's not going to work for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person I see is Kara Martone.
Hi, Greg. My name is Kara Martone. I live at 73 Woodbridge Drive. As the parent of a rising sophomore, I'm particularly concerned about the high school plan, and I'm so happy to hear about the extra hour that was in the plan presented today. That's a huge step for sure. My biggest concern, the couple of questions I still have regarding the synchronous learning, that I think they really need to be addressed before a plan is approved. But the questions I have are, according to the MOA as it stands, teachers have until 8 p.m. to post a recorded lesson. How are students supposed to keep up with the pace of a 4x4 schedule if their classes aren't available until 8 p.m.? That cannot be acceptable. If it's not going to be a live lesson at the same time as the kids in the building, it needs to be posted the morning of, or even the night before, whatever the teacher prefers. But to have until 8 p.m. to put it out there, it's almost pointless to even put it out there at that point, because the students are on to the next lesson the next day. And two, why do we only have live synchronous learning required in the full distance or limited in-person scenario, for which the high school students, it's basically the same. Limited in-person for the high school, almost every kid is at home. So any sort of hybrid that we have available for the high school students, they have that, the teachers have the leeway until 8 p.m. again to present the class materials for that day. So I'm stuck on the synchronous, why we can't require it in all scenarios for the high school students. And then lastly, I'm not sure that the students at home can be expected to follow a bell schedule if their classes aren't available. So it sort of all ties into the synchronous learning. And the kids have to have the access at the same time to remain on the schedule, to keep up the pace, and even to be able to work together and study together with kids in their class. If they don't have all the material at the same time, it's not synchronous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person I see is Anna C.
Hi, Anna Conti, 10 Bethany Lane. And I was originally here to speak on behalf of my two students who attend Forest Park, so I really appreciate the school committee and Dr. Auger listening to our emails and our all of our concerns about our kids being moved. And I appreciate all the work that's been done trying to return us to, safe in-person learning. As a special educator in a neighboring community, I can fully appreciate how difficult this task has been. But now I just have a couple of points of clarification. I was confused on the first two options. I'm confused as to why the drastic number of additional teachers at the elementary level, because were all of the students to be returning to in-person learning, we would still need the same number of educators. So I'm unclear as to why we need 16 more teachers for the Distance Learning Academy, why we can't just make shifts within staffing that is currently available. And also, if there was to be an increase in class sizes, I'm unclear as to why that would happen to the in-person classes and not the distance classes, if there was going to be a shift made because staffing was not available. So I'm not a math person, but I just was confused on those 2 points, and I just wanted to bring that up. So thanks again, you guys, for all of your work. I really appreciate everybody who got back to us and listened. So thanks.
Thank you. Next person, the name is just listed as Sue. And again, I forgot to mention this, and everyone's been doing it, but if you just state your name for record when you give this. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
You're good.
Yeah, my name is Sue Minos. I live at 118 Misty Meadow Lane. I have an incoming junior and an incoming senior. So I would reiterate what Karen Bartone and Christine Trask mentioned about the high school, the concerns about the learning process. So my big point that they spoke about, the high school principal mentioned is that every day, whether the kids were in and out of school, they would be responsible for a new lesson. So therefore, if they're responsible for a new lesson on the day that they are not in school in front of the teacher, how are you going to teach the kids that lesson? So I know currently what they had mentioned is that high school teachers have 3 options on how to teach the kids that lesson. And I think we can all agree that the only way the kids can learn new material if it is presented by the teacher. They cannot be sent slideshows or a blip from YouTube about how you, I'll give math as an example, how you do a particular math problem. So I think that's something that really needs to be discussed at the high school level, because the instructional piece, which we all, I think, can agree, is where we're all concerned at the high school level, is that if you're going to present new material to kids, you need to make sure you're doing it in a live teaching fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jamie Orsi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for all of your work, as everyone else has said. I think I echo that. And really quickly, I think a lot of what is said is everything has a trade-off. There are risks with every decision, mental health versus physical health. And I think everyone's doing their best in a non-ideal situation. The points I want to make is and I know you're overwhelmed in every capacity for the school committee and the administration, but just to keep the public informed of every decision or information that you do have. And I know sometimes guidelines can change daily or weekly, but just if you could keep the public informed with an email from Dr. Ojay, or just, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. If you don't have answers to questions, just say, I don't have that answer at that time. I know with people having to pick between in-person and distance learning, there's still a lot of questions. There's still a lot of questions about everything, and I know this is an ever-changing situation, but even giving us the answer to, let's see, so Dr. Ojay, you said the NK senior leadership was meeting with RIDE on Thursday, so if we can know the outcome of that meeting. If it's not public, you could say, you know, that's just a conversation in the administration. If there's an update on the Rhode Island Department of Health Educational Operations Committee who met with RIDE on Thursday, is there any information on that? So as people have mentioned, we have a wonderful engaged community, and an informed community is a good one. So if you could keep the information coming, for those of us who can't get on the phone all the time and advocate for our kids, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So you just need to mute yourself at the end. So next is Sue Alexander.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay, hi, my name is Sue Alexander. I live at 211 Earl Drive, North Kingstown. Just a few points I want to make. I've been on all these meetings, and I know you've heard it all before. But, you know, going back just to the beginning, because I know some people feel like we should go all distance learning, 83% of the parents, you know, said they want their kids back in school. I just think as a school committee, you can't ignore what an overwhelming majority of parents want. Some believe the benefits outweigh the risks, 83% of them, obviously. So as a school committee, I think you need to look at the options to make sure these kids are getting back to school. I personally feel that the most face-to-face interaction my student, my child, can get with the teacher is the most beneficial. I think that's true for every student. So even if we're just adding 15 minutes onto the day, that counts. I mean, I think about if my student's in class on Tuesday and Thursday of one given week, and on Tuesday he's taking a test, and usually they get an hour to take a test, no instruction except for that hour on Thursday. So any time we can get the students in front of the teacher is just the most beneficial to make them successful, make the teacher successful, to be able to teach the actual curriculum. I'm just going to reiterate what a few others have said. I'm extremely confused about this 8 p.m. deadline. I'm hoping I'm reading it wrong, but I'm thinking to myself, my student goes in on Monday and learns lesson 1 in math. On Tuesday, in order to learn lesson 2, because they said new instruction every day, it's a possibility, if a teacher does not choose to live stream, that they have till 8 o'clock at night to post whatever pre-recorded or other option, B or C option, till 8 o'clock at night. That doesn't put him on any kind of schedule. Why would you check in at your class time? if it's not being live streamed, it's almost like asking the kids to work the night shift and then get up and learn lesson 3 the next day when they are in person. I think that lesson needs to be put on at 7:15 in the morning so they can follow the schedule. I just don't see in what reality that makes any sense for my kid to wait around all day and possibly wait till 8 o'clock at night to learn the new material. Or I guess what's happening is teach yourself during the day, and then maybe if you have any questions, you can look at the recorded lesson at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, to me, that's just unacceptable. Other than that, I appreciate that the high school has finally, gotten an alternative plan, and I will stand behind any plan that can get my kids as much in-person time as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kimberly Lanoe.
Hey there, Greg.
Hello.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit on Sue, but head really in the direction of really stressing the importance of all of the plans, and a couple people even talked about the elementary schools, but certainly, obviously the high school. The importance of the plans allowing for return to normal based on, while we've been talking, and it's so easy to Google and find a million studies. 1,900 kids in Spain were tracked, 30 contracted COVID. No serious injuries. Even in our own state, which has been the study in daycare centers has made national news, 19,000 kids in daycare since June, 29 cases of coronavirus. And I will share personally, my son has been at Clemson for 2 weeks. Him and his friends have been hanging out like they would normally hang out. They all have coronavirus, and guess what? There were 15 of them together this morning having breakfast. None of them are sick, okay? Even the CDC has changed their guidelines. If you look at the frequently asked questions on the CDC website, should I be tested if I feel sick? And the answer is maybe. And it goes on further to say most people will have a mild illness. This is not a serious disease for our children. Yes, I understand some teachers may be at risk, and they will have to decide whether or not that risk is worth it for them. But for our kids, this is nothing more than a cold. The data in Rhode Island supports that. The data across the country supports that. The data across the world supports that. This is not a serious illness. Okay. You can very easily find it. So I would just encourage us to choose plans that will allow us to go back to normal, because that is where we're headed given the data. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Erin Watson.
Hello? Okay, can you hear me? Okay. I'm Erin Watson at 180 Orchard Woods Drive. I want to thank you guys, first of all, for presenting the new proposal before public comment. Very happy to see that the plans changed for the high school. Thank you for all the time and efforts to come up with the new plans. I do want to emphasize what Kara Martone, Sue Alexander, Sue Eno said, and just emphasize a few other points for the high school. Definitely, these classes must be live streamed. Or if the teachers don't want to do that, they definitely need to pre-record their lessons and post it the night before or the morning of the in-person class, so that all students in the class, the in-person and the at-home students, are learning at the same time. Both groups of kids can then help each other throughout the day. They can ask teachers questions, and they're ready to move on to the next assignment the next day. Definitely please vote to extend the day. The 1 o'clock time sounds wonderful. We appreciate that. The high school students definitely need more instruction time. And also just want to reiterate, if we do end up going to full distance learning eventually, which I 100% against, but you never know, please make sure the classes will be taught synchronously by all the teachers with a scheduled daily time with the teachers live to teach and answer the questions on the spot. But my biggest concern is the live streaming and the pre-recorded lessons right now. I want them on track, and I want them to get the pre-recorded lesson before the actual in-person lesson. Thank you.
Thank you. Next screening is Holly.
Yep, that's me. Hey, Greg. So my name is Holly Morin, and I live at 15 Keats Drive. I'm a parent of 2 Forest Park students and an active member of the Forest Park PTO, and my dog's about to start barking, so I'm sorry. Welcome to real life and virtual meetings. First, thank you all for your work these past few months. It's been challenging for everybody, and thank you for deciding to not relocate Forest Park Elementary students during these stressed and uncertain times. And here comes my entire family into my otherwise quiet house. After countless emails, calls, and then a successful rally on Thursday evening in the rain with local and state government officials, as well as media coverage, I think it was very clear that the Forest Park Elementary community, including myself and my family, strongly opposed the relocation of in-person learning at Forest Park Elementary Forest Park Elementary School students, which was option 3, which was unexpectedly proposed during the August 25th school committee meeting. So again, thank you for deciding to not relocate our students. That I still want to say, though, that I sincerely hope that our children need more to all than dollar signs or numbers that can be shuffled around on a spreadsheet to meet optimal results. After Tuesday night's meeting, and at that time, the way that option 3 was touted as the best option to meet distance learning needs, and then the slide that was shown, which listed the only negative associated with this plan to be a quote-unquote temporary move to a new building, it felt like the learning needs, safety, and social-emotional well-being of Forest Park Elementary students was completely disregarded, and the time and effort teachers and staff have invested to get the school ready ignored. This, and the fact that such a radical suggestion was made with less than 3 weeks before the scheduled start of school during a pandemic, is disconcerting and has had me honestly lose some trust and faith in the administrative governance that is currently leading the school district. I just want to also echo Jamie Orsi's recent comment about better communication and transparency from the administration, which would have helped tremendously. A second point that I want to make that I don't want to see get swept under the rug amongst all of this. It is my understanding that Quidnesset Elementary had the highest distance learning designation across the district and was significantly higher than other elementary schools. The percentage I was given was 40% of the school population elected distance learning. If this is true, which Dr. Roger actually said differently just earlier during this meeting, but if this is true, then this is significantly higher than other schools. So Forest Park is around 17%, and in chatting with other friends and colleagues in other districts, even in other states, you have around 10 to 20% of student population choosing distance learning. So I'm a scientist by training. And again, if this percentage is right, the scientist in me says, you've got an outlier in your data set. Why is that? And you often find out more information from your outliers than the overall trend you might be looking for. When I asked officials about this potential trend and why the percentage was so high, the answer was consistently, I don't know, as apparently the question of why are you choosing distance learning was never asked on the submission form. This is a major oversight. Understanding why families are choosing distance learning is equally as important to determining the overall number of distance learners. I strongly encourage you to follow up with North Kingstown distance learning families, and although I completely respect and acknowledge that this is a challenging and personal decision for many, you ask them why they chose to start the school year remotely. If the 40% distance learning election is correct for Quidnesset, you simply cannot ignore the motivations behind that significant otherwise, you're potentially disregarding the needs of yet another North Kingstown elementary school. So again, I realize Dr. O'Shea said it differently, so if this is not true, then my point is moot, but if it is correct, please make sure you consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Chris Macera. What you do now is you hit the unmute button. Yep, now you go.
Thank you, Dr. Roger, and everybody in administration, the board, for all of your hard work. So I think that in the spring, we were definitely crisis schooling, not distance learning. And my only concern, or ask, if you will, is about the Distance Learning Academy, that what we looked at for success for our students is that the synchronous and asynchronous lessons, and the itinerants, the reading groups, and the rigor be there for the students who are in elementary school as well as the students in middle school. Because I think that while we're looking at the here and now today, which is of course very important in the pandemic that we're facing, and we're preparing our readers and our writers, when our students get to 11th and 12th grade, where our high school students are and are readying for preparation for college, this pandemic will be over. And that rigor now is very important, and we can't afford a year lost or a year and a half lost. And it's really no fault of anyone's. I think we're all struggling and trying very hard. But I think it's extremely important that we make sure that our students have that time online with their teachers. And I do support our educators in North Kingston and our administration, because if you are in a classroom as a teacher, you understand that the teacher is not standing in front of the classroom for 7 hours instructing. They are giving a lesson to a group, and then they're waiting, and there's wait time. It's not, 6 hours of live instruction. So I'm hopeful that there is definitely some small instruction and check-in periods, and it's not just like a quick 1 hour check-in for the day. And that would be my hope for the Distance Learning Academy. And it's not just, as I said again, a 1 hour quick hello to the child in the morning or even at 10 o'clock. And I think that's very important. And even especially with their itinerants, a lot of children live for that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is William Alexander.
Yeah, hi Greg, this is Bill Alexander at 211 Earl Drive.
Hello.
So first, I want to thank Barbara Morse for presenting the new high school options. Several of the families from the high school have been asking for the data behind the reopening plan that was originally presented back in July. So I was very happy to see some more data and some more options today, even if it is at the 11th hour. A while ago, I conceded to the fact that NKHS would not be able to have all students in person every day for 30 plus out the normal 30 plus hours per week, and that the AB days was a foregone conclusion. But I wanted to understand why other schools with more kids in the building than us could do a full day and manage lunch. I found out that those schools are planning a form of grab-and-go lunch for students who did not bring one from home, and having all the kids eat in the classroom instead of the cafeteria. I still believe that option 3 that was presented today, going the full day, would be the best option and worth the additional financial cost. Although I don't really know what that additional financial cost is, it would have been great if the presentation had further broken down those extra costs, or if consideration was given to not eating in the cafeteria and only taking the lunch back to the classrooms. It is only 20 minutes after all, but it seems to me that you've already ruled out option 3, even without that specific cost breakdown. That said, I would certainly feel better if option 2 was adopted instead of the original plan, which was option 1, so that the high school students could receive 11 to 15 hours of in-person learning per week. Let's get real, the loss of that office time that was being talked about is not a big deal. I suspect the majority of the students at home would not use it anyway. And what if it was the flip side of that and all of the students wanted to use that office hours? How in the world was a teacher going to realistically service all the kids anyway? So I don't see, that as a con, losing that office time. So, I would just conclude that please adopt an option that contains a longer school day at the high school than the one that was in the original plan. I'm sure that something can be worked out with the Jamestown folks.
Thank you very much. Next person is Shay.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Blaswald and Dr. Auger and other members of the school committee. Really, your hard work during this time is much appreciated. I just have a couple things. So the first thing on the elementary distance.
I don't think I heard you say your full name and address. If you mind, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't, you're right. Shay Siciliano, 43 Charter Oak Court.
Thank you.
So on the distance learning option for elementary, and I appreciate the fourth option very much. And I'm looking at the fourth option as really option 2, plus adding some additional funds for staff to help with the Distance Learning Academy, and as well as to keep those class sizes smaller, whereas under the option 2, they would have been a little bit larger. And I will say first, safety for me in this is paramount, right? The well-being of our children, their physical well-being, as well as their social and emotional and mental well-being. But as a finance person by trade, I can't help but think about the cost as well, and think about long-term implications for our school department, and budgeting concerns down the road, especially if the case is that the other $500,000 that would go with option 4 is not able to be backed by our town council. So, I guess I would just, again, safety is paramount, and I do not envy your position of having to balance these concerns with budgetary constraints, but I'm also realistic about how that works. So we'll just ask you to keep that in mind. I'd also, just on a different note, like to take a moment to advocate for our teachers. I know it was said earlier that, for our children, this may not be a serious disease, and in some cases that is true, but our teachers are the ones who are being expected to educate our children, and knowing what that means for them, it could be serious. And I would like to think it's as easy as, if it's a teacher who is at risk or not comfortable, that they could simply elect and maybe obtain one of the distance learning positions. But knowing that that isn't always the case, we need to protect our teachers and our school staff as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next is Amanda Peterson.
Hi everyone, this is Amanda Peterson, 179 Prospect Avenue. I want to echo everybody else and say thank you so much for all the hard work you're doing in an impossible situation, and we do all appreciate that. I especially would like to thank you guys for the work with the police detail. That intersection at Hamilton can be absolutely hazardous, and I think with the massive influx of cars expected, there's going to have to be a good plan there to make that work. I did have some concerns that I think echoing what Jake said in the last meeting, that the classrooms at Hamilton are very, very small, and I'm hearing numbers of 25, 26 kids in a classroom, and I would love to hear how that's going to work, because I just don't see that as being possible. Sorry, my son just ran up. And I would also like to hear at some point what a plan is. These elementary kids, it's a lot of anxiety in my house. They haven't been in a classroom in 6 months. The kind of expectations that are put on them from teachers of how to behave in a classroom, all of that is going to need to be reinforced. And any information the parents can have about what arrival in the morning will look like, what lunch will look like, will help us prep them to make the day as successful as possible and try and take some of that load off the teacher. So communication really is super important. And I'm going to give the rest of my time to someone else. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Next is Kelly Healy.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I'm Kelly Healy. I'm at 40 Elam Street. I want to first say I appreciate the efforts and the thoroughness, your thoughtfulness, knowing that no option comes without cons. As a parent, as all of us, I think we're struggling to identify the best options for our kids. And what could be really helpful is, regardless of synchronous, asynchronous, in-person, or distance learning, is to really clarify what instruction will truly look like. We just don't know. So providing specific examples of ways in which authentic learning and the principles of effective teaching and learning will occur, like how will immediate targeted feedback be given, peer engagement and collaboration, teacher conferencing, teacher-student conferencing, purposeful formative assessments, differentiation, personalization, the remediation and rigor, and student choice. So really just knowing best that these things will still be in play and how in which they will be, whether it's through the use of different tools, I think could be helpful for a lot of us for making decisions that will thus help you make the best decisions as a committee. So thank you.
Thank you. Next screening is Neil.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. This is Neil Jones, 115 Eileen Drive. Two students at the elementary level. Recognizing the numbers are still being sorted out, I was hopeful that you could provide the numbers for in-person learning by school and by grade level to help us understand how class sizes are going to look. And also, I'd echo Kelly's comments. It's very difficult to make decisions absent very specific information between distance learning and in-person. Any information that you can provide is helpful. Up to this point, it's been relatively general. So in terms of the specifics of how a distance learning day will function, if you have a sample schedule, things of that nature, I understand you may not be able to provide them in advance, but anything you can give us is better than the limited information we have now. So I would urge you to provide more information as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, the screen name is Pam.
Pam Pinero, 710 Slocum Road. Thank you for listening today and all you've done. I'm going to say that I'm grateful to live in North Kingstown. I am grateful that we as a community have still, at this date in the game here, are offering choice. And I am grateful that we have not gone to distance learning only as an option. So I'm very thankful to be living in North Kingstown, so I appreciate that. I appreciate choice, and I agree with Kelly and Neil, it needs to be an informed choice. So I've been saying all along, I want more communication, more communication. I know another district recently just released a schedule of what distance learning will actually look like for them, because a lot of us can't get out of our head what we experienced in the spring. I think it should also be made a little bit more clear. I believe an option to do distance learning is still available. I don't think it's 100% clear how long it's available and when a new deadline is. So if that could be made clearer to people, as well as I agree with any information on class size. Everyone has a different comfort level of whether they want to send their kid or not. Everyone has different risks. Everyone knows their family the best. They need to make an informed decision. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next screen name is Linda's iPad 3.
Hi, this is Linda Sherman, 150 Duck Cove Road. I would like to say as briefly as possible, I fully support those that have spoken about maximizing the number of hours that our high schoolers can be in the school building, and also, appreciative that there are other options being looked at the high school level. And lastly, those opportunities to keep the distance learning in the AV program synchronous at all times. One thing I want to just bring up that I think needs clarification, Dr. Morse spoke about the ability to transition to either fully distance learning or fully in-person learning should circumstances change, and I'm not really sure how the 4x4 schedule would allow that to happen. So some clarification there would be great. And the other thing is, I'm still feeling that there is a lot of restriction in the hours our high schoolers can be in the school building because of lunch. And to be frank, this seems ridiculous to me. I think there are lots of options out there, including parent volunteers. This is North Kingstown. If you need 50 parents to come in and monitor lunches, you're going to have 100 sign up to do it. So I think there are some things that could be worked out with lunch creatively and out of the box, perhaps, to support the teachers, to get them the breaks that they deserve, but to maximize the hours that our kids can be in the school building. Thank you very much for listening to all of us today. It really is truly appreciated.
Thank you. Next person is Sherry Kennedy.
Hi everyone, this is Sherry Kennedy, 25 Charter Oak Court, and I have to just say, I wasn't going to say this, but what Linda just said I think is true. I truly love living in North Kingstown because I feel like if there's a problem, we just all bond together to figure it out. So I have twin daughters that will be going to school in second grade at Forest Park, and so I want to thank the school committee for supporting no on option 3. But I also want to say I've always praised the school department because I feel like the communication has always been great. And I know you've always had to make tough decisions and put our children first. So I was pretty shocked on Tuesday when I felt option 3 did not put our children first. And what I really want to say is I think we're a town and a community that if you just need to figure out a way to keep all the kids in the building safely, ask us and we'll help. I feel like there's a lot of smart people in North Kingstown, kind of similar to she was saying about the lunch from the high school. I think we can figure it out and maybe not spend as much money as we need to. I just feel like asking for outside help might be a solution as well. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate all the time and effort that everyone has been putting into it. North Kingstown is truly a great community to live in.
Thank you. Next is Kate Scott.
Hi, Kate Scott, 10 Jasmine Circle. My question is around the Distance Learning Academy. I have signed up both of my children for that. What happens if we don't get 13 teachers in 2 weeks? Where do those children go? How do they receive their education? Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Katie Webster.
Hi, this is Fred Webster, 130 Delta Drive. We have a incoming third grader and kindergartner going to Hamilton this year. I think I heard earlier in the meeting that the new commit date for distance learning is Monday at 3 o'clock. Some of the trouble my wife and I are having is I don't feel like we have the information that's needed to make that decision. I think Jake asked a lot of good questions in the meeting early in the week, and I think we'd like to hear the answers to those. Specifically, what is the plan to create a safe environment for classrooms that have 25, 26 kids? And how is the school going to react and handle when a child in one of those classrooms gets sick? Additionally, I think Neil brought up some good points. What is the Distance Learning Academy going to look like? What types of tools are they going to use? And just what's the general schedule and day in the life of a distance learner going to be? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next person is Jason Walesko.
So good afternoon. I just want to again thank everyone for their work on the committee and whatnot. A lot of information today. I have 2 students that will be in the elementary school level this coming year, and I experienced the distance learning option that we had to all go through last year, and my concern is on the agenda is we see that distance learning on there, and as I look at the numbers and listen to people talking, 80% of the town, again, I know someone mentioned this, has echoed their voice to have their students in school. And I can't implore enough that the committee listen to that and they take that into consideration, where we all have choices that we have to make, whether immune compromised and we don't feel comfortable having our child in school or whatever the case might be, and someone said, we know our family best. We have to look at the bigger picture as well. And we know that we're going to be dealing with this in some capacity for the foreseeable future. I, for one, have been going to work every single day, have had to adapt, have had to come up with changes in protocols. And the schools have had to do the same thing, not just because of the pandemic that we're faced with, but just in general in history. when we've gone through some type of adversity or tragedy or whatever it might be, it was not about what do we need to do to keep kids out of school, but what can we do to keep kids in school? How do we make the school safe? And this is no different. I think that we have health experts from the state, the Department of Ed, that have spoken about our particular situation and that North Kingstown, for example, is safe to go back. We have a plan in place. We have a plan for those that don't feel comfortable sending their child to school, which is great, and I support that. We have a plan in place for those that want to send their children back to school, and I think that's important. We look at the North Kingstown School website, that the first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students attending public schools, and that we have to listen to the community, and that after all the facts that we've heard and of everything that's on the news, we have to look at the big picture, folks. And what I mean by that is, this is not going away 3 months from now. It's not going away a year from now, more than likely. We don't even know if there's going to be a vaccine. Are we going to be having this same conversation next year at this time? We can't live off what if. And I just want to make sure that when we look at the big picture, what are we doing for these kids? Because ultimately, my fear is how far behind, if we are in distance learning, what is the impact of them a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? I thank you for your time, and I just want to emphasize the importance of this, especially at the elementary level, that we get as many kids back into that building as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Eric's iPhone, which may or may not be attached to Eric.
Hi there, can you guys hear me okay?
I can, if you just take your...
Yes, of course. This is not Eric, this is Heather Murphy, 41 Mountain Laurel Way. I also wanted to thank our high school team for showing us some more logistical things. It's helpful to see that. It's also good to know we're working on getting our kids in the building as much as possible. I wanted to briefly talk about, there is still on the agenda D1, which is discussion of possible action for implementation of full distance learning. I'm not sure if that's where we're going given the spirit of our discussions today, but this is, certainly worst fear for me. And after listening to some of the data presented by school committee member the other night, I felt very concerned that there were no scientific basis nor evidence to support that presentation. I got really concerned that school committee members would be making decisions based on misrepresented numbers pulled out from the website that are really unapplicable to our current circumstance. I also heard fear and anxiety, which is certainly understandable, but really has no place in decision making when it comes to the well-being of our children. Ms. Lanaway did mention the daycare numbers from Rhode Island. This was actually published in the CDC's Mortality and Morbidity Weekly Review. It highlighted the program here about daycare centers in Rhode Island, and I could certainly get this report to any school committee member who wanted to read through. It mentioned about 19,000 children, and from June to July, only 33 infections. I think what's also highlighted in this is that 70% of those COVID cases, there was only one occurrence per center. So that's really encouraging. And I'm not asking you to believe me, nor agree with me, but please make informed decisions. There's a wealth of experts at our disposal, Department of Health and elsewhere. We have a very smart state epidemiologist you could talk to. You could even call your local pediatrician. So in summary, any school committee member who's going to vote based on data presented the other night, which included really fear and really not facts, needs to really recuse their vote. Decision-making for our children should be objective, must be objective. Thank you for all your hard work. We really, really appreciate it. I know sometimes with all the emails you're getting, maybe you don't think so, but we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Chris Comel. Sorry if I mispronounced it.
Hi, that's Lance Comeau here, and I'm at 67 Floral Ave, and I just wanted to thank school committee members, Dr. Ajay, for listening to our responses, also the Forest Park PTO. I just wanted to give some insight into basically some further consideration looking at the distance learning. So there's still some parents are unsure what that vision is going to look like. Is it going to be synchronous or asynchronous learning? And if we're looking at synchronous learning, consideration should be placing the distance learning teachers alongside actual classroom teachers. So with these unusual times, we have to think of creative solutions, and ideas could be thinking about logistics. How are we going to place these teachers? For instance, let's say that we have K through 5, maybe placing K and 1 in one school building, second grade, third grade in another school building, and 4 and 5 in another school building. But basically, I just want you to think outside the box and thinking of how to make that happen. I thank you for not choosing option 3, and also utilizing other resources. I know that that's a hefty dollar figure, and thinking about ways to use other resources to possibly minimize that. I think using paraprofessionals, teachers, parent volunteers, looking at universities for student teachers, just thinking of all available options. But I thank you for listening to our voices, and let me know if you need any further help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Susan Evanson.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Thank you. Thank you guys for allowing this forum for people to share their thoughts and opinions, of which there are wide varieties. I think first and foremost, we all just appreciate the chance to express our thoughts, and thank you for your hard work and your efforts. Certainly everyone has their own comfort levels and their own daily walks of life that contribute to their choice for their preferences for their children. In our family, we have students at each of the 3 levels of schools, so it's for some of us a tough choice to navigate, and for other people, anxiety is created by full distance learning, while for some, anxiety is created by full in-person learning. I think it's important to be respectful of everyone's perspectives, not assuming that everyone has the same. And again, you're allowing us all to express ourselves, which is great. Certainly safety is paramount, not just for students, but also for staff who are also being taxed. Parents are feeling like we need more information, we need some more transparency. Yes, in fact, we are. However, staff are much in the same boat as we're still making decisions for what option will be played out. And then lastly, I'd just like to reiterate some support for some other comments that have been made, which is synchronized learning, allowing students to receive lessons at same or nearly the same time as in person. If students are at home learning, that they could receive that information and those lessons perhaps live or by pre-recorded lessons posted the night before or the morning of, not the evening after. And we appreciate the chance for extended learning time during the day and the strategies that are being looked at to achieve that. Also, if we could, as someone mentioned, having home learners follow some semblance of a bell schedule, it seems like if we're going to do that, it would certainly need to be said that synchronized learning or live pre-recorded lessons would have to happen in tandem in order to achieve that. And having staff available for office hour comments or questions by students would be great as well. Thank you so much for hearing us all and for your efforts.
Thank you. Next is Claire Farrell.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I'm Claire Farrell. I live at 16 Sawmill Drive. I first wanted to start by just expressing my appreciation for the school committee's commitment to opening safely. I think that needs to be the #1 consideration with any scenario that we're talking about. I also think that it's important to remember that 80 or 83% number that's being thrown out includes people who are choosing to go back because they don't have any other choice, not necessarily because they believe it's the best or basic option for their family. So I think that that number is a little bit misleading, and it's important to keep that in mind and that's another reason that, considering safety first is important. And then I'd just like to echo the request for increased communication for the community, specifically two areas that I think of. I'd like to know more about the new EDOC, those walkthroughs that are going to happen, what happens with them, when are they occurring, and what are the results of them. I think it's important for people in the school community and community at large to be aware of those things as they're happening. And then as well as the distance learning, the differences between spring and fall, what that will look like, why it was the way it was in the spring, and how we're looking to make it better, and then just communicating clearly about what it will look like. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Kerry Smith.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Awesome. My name is Carrie Smith, and I live at 116 Plain Road. And I just wanted to bring up, actually, well, I'm just going to echo what other people said, that I do not feel that full district learning should be passed. I would like the opportunity, both of my children, one will be in second grade, the other one's entering sixth. They both have voiced that they want to go back to school, knowing full well that it will not look the same. But the other two things I wanted to comment on quickly was Mr. Mather brought up numbers at Tuesday's meeting, and one of them was about the mask policy. And he's correct, and I fully support the idea that a mask policy should not be passed if it has unrealistic expectations. I think everyone's looking at numbers and 3 feet and distance, but you also have to look at reality. And if our children are in pods, I've been in my own pods this summer. I've had a very busy, exciting social summer, but wearing my mask in pods when I need to. So I think that needs to be looked at. And I also think special consideration needs to be thought about for students with special needs that may have a little bit more difficulty complying with mask wearing. And then the last thing is another thing that Mr. Mather said at the meeting was about fire drills and active shooter drills. And I was just wondering if that is something that has to be done. I know that it's required to do so many a year, but given a global pandemic, is that something that can be waived by the state or whoever needs to be waived so that we don't have to deal with the extra chances of kids, collecting together. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Paula Brennick.
Hi.
Hello. Yes.
Hi. I'm sitting at the Aqua, so I don't know if you can hear me very well.
You're a little choppy, but...
Yeah, I'm sorry for not getting here, but I wanted to say to everybody that, before I go to the case was happy, I don't want to go into a lot of other things, but I wasn't going to chime in because I didn't want to say this, but I will. My daughter's out of the district at Forest Park, and every year we wait in late August for that envelope to make sure she's never happy with it. In fact, I know this was when my daughter was in head start to try to make that a thing, and transportation was the issue. But then when all my predictions about my demographics came true, Dr. Jake Rodet, Ocean Hyder, and Ken McPhee worked with me, and and I only had the luxury of spending her time from first on at Forest Park. And I never knew the spring of the kids. It was great. I mean, this year during the pandemic, I'm better than ever that I was just wrong. Because this I am in Savannah, every day with those kids, and it was amazing. It was trying. It was trial and error. Sometimes the students help the teacher helped the students, and the students helped each other, and it was amazing. That's what's just not everything down. I don't know everything I can to keep on the right message. So I hope that this is what you guys say for me. And I'm sorry that I didn't hear it, but I'm
choppy, we can barely hear you, so I don't know if you're all set.
I am, so yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we really can't anymore.
All right, but anyway,
We did. It's just very, very choppy, getting a bit worse, so, all right.
no, I'm sorry, so okay, thank you.
Next is Megan Chabot.
Hi, Megan Chabot, 66 Charles Street. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you very much for hearing our voices over the last few meetings, and a lot of us in the high school. The parents really wanted longer days, and I appreciate that option's now been put on the table. So that said, I just reiterate what everyone else has pretty much said about the high school. Definitely, this family votes for a longer day, so we hope to take that into consideration as you vote. And the only other thing I would add is just little concerned about hearing potential cuts if we can't find the money. So obviously that's a little bit in the back of my mind. I'm sure we'll figure it out and make it work, but hopefully those cuts will not come. That's it.
Okay, so sorry. Okay. All right, I see no other hands, so if there aren't any more, I'll give another minute just in case anybody wants to raise their hand. And I'm not seeing any more, so I want to thank everyone who's commented. We definitely hear them, and I'll ask Jim just to mention, Dr. O'Shea, some of those questions I think can be added to our frequently asked questions list that you've compiled. Particularly once we've gone through the agenda items that we have and make our decisions. So next we're going to get to our routine items. If I could ask for a motion to seal the executive session minutes of August 29th, 2020.
So moved.
A motion from Ms. Hoskins.
Second.
And a second from Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I heard only two. Mr. Mather, okay. Ms. Hoskins, yes?
Aye.
Aye. Yes. And Mr. Mather, are you there? He's still with us. Mr. Mather?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm muted.
So I just need your vote on executive minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's unanimous. I can disclose that no votes were taken in this evening's executive session. I usually say evening, sorry. This rare Saturday morning afternoon session of the North Kingstown School Committee, no votes were taken in our executive session this morning. For unfinished business, so first item is the significant modifications to that. So I'm not sure who's the best person to sort of speak to that. Maybe even Ms. Carroll. Mrs. Carroll?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Blackboard. What we did is we listened to all of the information that we've been receiving from the Department of Health, from RIDE, and from the parents and from members of the school committee, and from some of the building principals. And what we were able to do is we were able to modify the policy so that now it can be followed. Basically, we are hoping that there will be times during the day when students will be able to take off their masks, because that was an issue, but we're going to try to keep within the necessary distance. So it's been modified. Every school committee member received a copy of it last night. There were a couple of edits to it. I think we need to put it on the website so the parents can see it. However, this is what we're asking you to support today.
Thank you very much.
I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, anyone have any questions on the mask policy? Actually, you know what, let's start with, if I could get a motion to approve the second read.
So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Hoskins, do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Jones. Okay, so discussion-wise, any members have any questions? To basically do this in an extraordinarily broad brush, so people, members of the public know the basics of it, it's saying that employees are going to be, which includes, all staff, are going to be wearing their masks. If there are certain circumstances where someone might have their own office, they can close their door. As long as they're having appropriate social distancing, they can remove it in those situations. And same thing with meals, as long as they're appropriately socially distanced, they could remove it briefly to do that, provided that they perform necessary hand hygiene and replace the mask when they're done. With respect to students, students are expected to come to the school each day with their own face coverings, but they will be provided for those who don't have them. There is an exemption for students whose health or safety is at risk wearing a mask, provided they're able to provide appropriate documentation for that. There are some limited exceptions for situations that make sense. So a student who's in a classroom or participating in a supervised activity could be permitted to remove their mask as long as they're 6 feet from any other individuals. They have to wear their mask at all other times. And they could be given a mask break if they're able to be put in a large room where they can be situated from others or outside, and in limited circumstances when eating or drinking. So basically what we're looking at is a policy that is, you wear your mask, except when it's, a situation that's safe to remove it. The examples that I've always thought of are if a PE teacher is conducting an outside class, they tell the kids to be 6 feet apart or more, and the teacher says, okay, you can put your mask in your pocket, let's do 20 jumping jacks. I don't think that that's an unreasonable or unsafe thing, and that all fits in with the guidelines that the state has been giving us. So I think this is a pretty good balance between, a 100% no exception rule and one that takes reasonable exceptions.
Can I just say something real quick? I just want to state, I know I had some major objections to this on Tuesday, that I just want to state that I do fully support the purpose and the philosophy. I still have some significant issues with how we might be able to accommodate mass or distancing during lunch and during drills and stuff like that. But I don't want it to prevent us from having no policy. So I do believe that this policy is, although perhaps not enforceable, it's much better than no policy at all.
Thank you.
If I could address that, Mr. Mallory, we certainly heard what you had to say, and you and I have had some conversations. This is the best we can do right now. As you know, the guidance keeps changing from 3 feet, 6 feet. We're getting a lot of different information. And as I said, based on the information that we have right now, this is the best we can do with a policy.
Understood, and that's why I don't want to make a big deal about it, because I do believe the mask policy is really important, and I do believe in the philosophy and the purpose of it. And not having policy is way more dangerous.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just have a kind of a process question. So this is our second read. This means if we are voting to approve or not approve the policy.
Right? Approval, correct.
Okay, and then just for communication back to families who maybe aren't watching this, I'm wondering if Dr. Roche can talk to that and how this will be communicated to families. So that
it will certainly be a part of our communications coming directly from, from me and then also from principals at every school.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Then hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Jones? Okay, yeah. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, now for procedural matter, I apologize. I realized after we did this agenda that the order of this agenda does not necessarily make sense. So I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to move item D1 up now. And simply logic of we're going to have a discussion. And for folks in the audience, this is how it's done. We have a discussion. We may or may not have a vote. But it was requested by a member of the school committee that we have an agenda item talking about possibly implementing full distance learning. If we did that, the rest of our conversation on our agenda becomes rapidly moot, so it only makes sense to deal with this item first. Is there discussion on item D1, or anyone like to make a motion with that?
I'd like to have a discussion.
Okay, well, we need a motion to have
a motion. Okay, I'll make a motion.
And what is your motion?
To discuss.
Well, no, we need a motion. We discuss an action, so we need to make a motion on what we want to have happen, and then we would discuss whether or not we're going to do that thing. Sorry, I don't mean to give you a hard time.
No, I'm still here.
So Jake, you would make a motion for full distance learning?
That's what you want to do.
I would like to make a motion for full distance.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it just so Jake can have his discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So, Mr. Mather, it's your motion. You have the floor.
I have major hesitations. I expressed most of them on Tuesday. I won't go on my 20-minute rant. Major hesitations about returning to in-person learning. I think it's unnecessarily risky and irresponsible. I also understand that is maybe not I don't maybe represent the majority of the voice of the community, or the vote of the rest of the school district or the school committee. I strongly think that we should be doing the best thing that we can do to keep our kids safe in a responsible way. Again, I'm not naive to the fact that I'm sure this is not going to pass, but the reality is that it's going to take extra staff, it's going to take extra cleaning, extra PPE, extra accommodations, literally every single step of the way. And I want to make sure that we do it right. And we don't have a perfect option. We never had a perfect option. We never will have a perfect option. But I just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. If that means that we need to be spending more money on these things in the short term, I will certainly be behind or support that over risky physical and emotional health of our students in classrooms if that's the way it is going to go.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add, Mr. Mather, I understand your position, and I hear what you're saying. What I would say is that we are following every bit of guidance that has been given to us by the Department of Health and the Department of Education. We are also, I meant to say this earlier, I have to make this point, and I try to make it every single day, not every single meeting. We still have not heard from the governor of the state of Rhode Island whether we are reopening. I need to say that again. That's supposed to happen on Monday. It was supposed to happen 2 weeks ago, and it didn't. So I'm assuming it's going to finally happen on Monday, and the governor is going to dictate what level of reopening we have. So that being said, it is entirely possible that this discussion will be taken out of our hands by the governor, but she is doing this in consultation with a slew of experts and consultants and a medical director and doctors and epidemiologists and a whole lot of people that we don't have access to. So I need to defer to the State of Rhode Island Department of Education, Department of Health, with respect to these guidelines, make sure that we follow them, and that we reopen as best as we possibly can based upon the restrictions that have been imposed upon us. The other thing that I'll add is that we have moved heaven and earth to provide the residents of North Kingstown with a distance learning option so that those families that are concerned for medical reasons, for whatever reason, about the safety of their children have that as an option. And I'm just not willing to ignore the 80-something% of the parents who have chosen not to partake in that option and deprive them of the opportunity of sending their children to a school that has been following every guidance that the Department of Health and Department of Education has given us. So that's where I am. So any other members want to comment? Ms. Tilton-Brand?
So I don't disagree with a lot of the points that Jake has made. I think all of us feel this heavy weight on our shoulders to make a decision for all of the children and families and teachers and administrators that are in this community. I kind of hesitate on the 80%, right? So I keep thinking about 20% of our families opted into distance learning, 80% did not.
However, I think that there are a good number of families out there that didn't really have a choice because those families, those are in situations where they have to send their children to school. They don't have a really great option, especially for the younger kids, for them to stay home. If their parents are working, if they come from single family situations, or have just a complicated situation where their children are not allowed to stay home. And so I think of them too, and I think one of our community members brought that up today as well. I am not in favor at this point of full distance learning. However, I completely understand and see where Jake is coming from. I get it. I like I said, I feel the weight as everybody does. But at this point, I feel like we could move forward and see what happens. I think a lot of us are also kind of anticipating that things may change somewhere. We're in September. Who knows what October, November, December is going to bring? And we may be in a very different place in a couple of months. And talking about really different things too. So that is kind of where my head is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to be recognized?
I mean, I just want to say that, I hear everybody's points, and I agree with Lisa that this weighs heavily on all of us. I can't speak for others on the committee. We've heard from everybody, and people choosing not to distance learn. I appreciate the administration and everybody. We gave options. There are fairly good options for distance learning out there, really good options with the Distance Learning Academy, with the, following the days of the high school and middle school. I'm hoping that with those options that people who are uncomfortable going back to school will take us up on those options and use them. I think it's really important for some of the social and emotional well-being of many kids to get them back to some sort of normalcy, even though school will not look normal. And that includes my family. My kids need to get back to school. They need some normalcy. So I understand Jake's position in that sense, but I think we are in a good place in Rhode Island, and I think that we'll do fine moving forward.
Thank you. Anyone else like to be recognized?
Yes, Greg.
Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We lost 200-something parents already, but I would say, I'm not going to reiterate the points that everyone's made. I would say, I also mentioned the 80%, 82%, 83%, whatever the right number is, but to me, I focus on the 82, 83%, that is roughly the percentage that North Kingstown taxpayers fund North Kingstown School District education. And if the governor makes a last-minute decision to close schools, I would say that is a slap in the face to communities like North Kingstown. I would also say that if that was the decision she was going to make, she should have made it weeks ago so we can focus on one option, because while many of the community here have spoken and expressed their appreciation for the work, I truly don't think they understand fully the amount of time and effort that the administration, in working with their faculty and staff partners and the community and the town partners and vendors, have put in to try and provide a full array of options, given that the state really tied our hands in a lot of instances, unlike the state of Connecticut that said, tell us how you need to make it work, and then we'll talk about what those restrictions are. Instead, the state said, here's a whole bunch of restrictions, and then chided us for not being so creative. So I support that the administration and the superintendent is proposing something that, while not perfect, provides a heck of a lot of choices for parents, far more than many other districts are doing. And I frankly wish the state would focus on giving us resources instead of giving us obstacles.
Thank you. I think everyone's had an opportunity to speak at this point. Anyone else that I missed on the school committee or our representatives? Okay. So at this point, we have a motion and a second on the table, and so we'll call a vote. All those in favor of approving Mr. Mather's motion for full distance learning, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No.
Nay.
The motion fails, 1 yes and 4 noes. Okay, so next, moving on, the agenda, going back a little bit, with elementary plans. Need to have a discussion about what we want to do with that. Anyone like to be recognized and kick that off?
Do we need a vote on this as well, Greg? We need a motion and a vote, or?
Yeah, I mean, well, we need to know which way we're gonna go, so someone needs to make a motion. One point I wanna make is, we're essentially approving potentially, Dr. Ajay's recommendation is kind of a combination of various things, so we should phrase that motion in that way and be specific as to what it is that we want to do. So, Mr. Jones, did you have?
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the superintendent's proposal for the reopening of North Kingstown School District on September 14th with option 4 for elementary schools and option 2 for the high school, and the current proposal is recommended by the superintendent for middle school.
I second that.
Wait, this last one.
This is Carol. Can you chime in a little bit?
So, all right, so first of all, it's going to be 2 separate items on the agenda. So, I think, on the agenda, we have for elementary either option 1, 2, or 3. It appears that the superintendent is recommending a combination of options 2 and 3. Isn't that really what you meant, Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I thought we called it option 4, but I will amend my motion if that was in error.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not a combination of 2 and 3 that you're recommending, is it, Dr. Ajay?
1 and 2.
It's 1 and 2.
I'm sorry, 1 and 2.
It takes in some of the characteristics of 1, 2, and 3.
Mr. Chairman, I will withdraw my motion.
Okay, so we need unanimous consent to do that, so anyone object to starting over? I hear no objection, so we'll start over.
Okay, so you are accepting the superintendent's recommendation, which is a combination of options 1 and 2.
Well, then I will make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. I will make a motion to adopt the superintendent's recommendation for the reopening of the elementary schools.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Well, one thing we need to discuss that's going to go along with that is funding. That's under item E when we get to that. So I'm okay with approving this option, but we need to be pretty specific about what authority we're giving for the approval of unbudgeted positions, as well as what the funding sources are going to be for that. So we'll get to that when we get to option E. Any other discussion? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, discussing the high school schedule. Anyone want to kick that off with a motion?
I would make a motion to adopt option 2, extending the day to 1 o'clock for the high school.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Hildebrand. Okay, discussion. Dr. Ajay, I just want to circle back to you for a second because there were questions about Jamestown, and I've gotten a text from you that there's been some discussion, so if you can fill us in on that.
Yeah, so very briefly, I, got offline and talked to Superintendent Duba, and, we don't know the specifics right now, but we are confident we'll be able to figure it out. This involves the Jamestown busing schedule, and they have buses that go to Kingstown and to Narragansett. And so a little bit of coordination is going to need to take place there. Whatever we can do to help them out, we will. and I'm confident that we can make it work.
Thank you. That's an important piece, so I just want to make sure that we're all clear there. We have a motion and a second. Any further
I
discussion?
just want to say I want to thank the administration for coming up with another option that extends the day for these kids so that their curriculum can really be taught in a longer period. You know, I understand distance learning was thrown at our teachers, students, and families that, you know, they had to take vacation to prepare for it with little to no training. I do want to say my kids' teachers, we had a great experience. My 5th grade teacher at Hamilton was amazing. She followed the schedule. She did live teaching, and my kid is ready for middle school because of that woman. I also want to say my daughter struggled in math in middle school, and same thing. Her teacher recorded lessons. They did the recordings, and then he had live classrooms to work on the problems or issues that the kids were having. So I think with the extended day and the presentation we saw, which highlighted the new learning and instruction that will happen every day with the AB schedule that the high school distance learner, both high school and middle schools, you know, I'm really hoping that the teachers choose synchronous learning as their option to teach so that everybody can be engaged, like you said, throughout the day on, you know, according to the school bell schedule. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And, you know, I just want to say, you know, we spent a long time working on this agreement with the teachers, and I certainly understand the concerns. I know that they want these same things. You know, they're professionals. They want to reach their students, and they want to be teaching their students in as timely a way as possible. You know, some of the timing pieces on that MOA are just basically for logistics. You know, they want to make sure that they have what they need, you know, every day to make sure that they can get, you know, what they need in a timely basis, but not get, you know, reprimanded if they can't, you know, make it in, you know, quite a timely basis as we would all want. So, but that's their intention, and you know, we'll see how this goes. I also want to make one more point about that came up earlier about parent volunteers coming in. You know, we have long had a contract in North Kingstown that, you know, lunch duty and that kind of thing is just not a part of a teacher's day. There is a lot that they need to be responsible for, the teaching of our students. And we also have a big push for them to be responsible for, you know, planning in common with one another. That's something that is not necessarily unique to North Kingstown, but a lot of districts don't have that either. And so that benefits us in a great way. Since we started doing that, we have seen, you know, test scores in North Kingstown move in the right direction because of it. So I'm happy that we have that arrangement. The request about volunteers coming in these following RIDE guidelines, they are discouraging, if not banning, any volunteers coming into buildings. They want, you know, the fewer people, the better. Because again, that increases that contact list. So we have a volunteer organization, Links. They're eager to help out, but that may be a lot of virtual work that they're doing with individual students to help us out. So we're still talking about that, but just having, you know, kind of a wave of parents to come in to, say, supervise lunch or something like that, that is strictly against the RIDE and the Department of Health guidance. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to mention something a little bit, sort of what Dr. Jay was just saying. I very much appreciate, and so many people have come to us with different ideas to address, you know, some of the issues that we've explained or what are driving some of these plans, and parts of the plans that are less than ideal. You know, we all know that there are parts of what we're doing that are not what we would be doing if we could have different rules. And I very much thank everyone for that. The problem with a lot of them are there are certain details of them that they don't have the full understanding of what our requirements are, the classic being that, you know, the parent volunteer question, or often they may address one or two of the many problems with, you know, preventing us from having a full high school, you know, perfect reopening the way things were, but not all of them, and they all interact with each other. And, you know, even if we could, you know, solve one piece of the problem, it doesn't change the other pieces of the problem. And unless the whole problem can be solved by one single magical idea, it just doesn't work. And that's what most of these things have done. And a lot of the suggestions and things that the administration has looked at and figured for one reason or another, they're not allowed, it just can't work, and no one wants to hear money, but there is a point when things are just absolutely just untenable with money. I mean, sometimes money does come in. If something's going to cost us $20 million to do, even if it were wonderful, there's just certain things we can't always do, and that is a driver sometimes. So having said that...
Laszlo, I know that Mrs. Schott has her hand raised as well.
I'm sorry, I missed it. My apologies, and I see Ms. Hildebrand. So sorry. Mrs. Schott, I'm going to recognize you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Brosbog. I don't mean to continue to be a squeaky wheel, but I don't get I think and this is just a point of information, not a point of anything else, and obviously I'm not a voting person, but I think the logistics of the bus situation for Jamestown will probably be more complicated than, hopefully it can get solved. My impression from my conversations with our transportation coordinator and superintendent is that it's not going to be a simple fix, so I just want everyone to be aware of that. Obviously, you guys need to take a vote and determine this, but we're going to need some significant help to make the busing work, and I just want to be on the record in saying that, and I'm hopeful that we will get that help. So thank you.
Understood.
Thanks, Phil.
Ms. Hildebrand.
So just to kind of echo what everybody's saying, thank you all. As one of the members of the school committee who has a child in high school, this has been something that I have kind of kept a close eye on and talked to a lot of parents and a lot of the high school students as well about. I was okay with the original plan around them getting out a little bit earlier, but I'm okay with the extending to 1 o'clock as well. But I do want to just point out one quick thing, and maybe it's minor to some, but it's a little bit of an issue with me, is the issue around the snack or the breakfast. So, I understand that from Dr. O'Jay, that the kids will be provided a power bar at their advisory. Their advisory is first thing in the morning, and I think I saw between 7:15 and 7:30. So we know that some of our high school students are getting on the bus at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that potentially means that, with the exception of one power bar, they are not eating again until 1 o'clock at least, or those that are riding buses home, it could be even significantly later. And I just want to throw that out there, and don't know that it's in the best interest of our kids from a health and safety perspective to have them go that long without eating. That's a really long time. And so I know that hopefully we can be creative around that solution. I know it's not like a major roadblock, red flag kind of thing, but I just want to throw that out there to be on the record. But it's a bit of a concern for me that my child is not going to eat between 6 a.m. potentially and 1:30. The only other thing I have is a question around, and maybe Dr. Morse can answer this, or maybe Dr. O'Jay can put it in the FAQ. Heard from several incoming freshman parents that are concerned around an orientation and how that's going to work. Typically, we know that the freshmen go the first day of high school on their own, and I don't know how that works with an AV schedule or if that's even something that's possible. Is it going to be virtual? Are there any conversations or plans about that? Because I am hearing some concern from the freshman kids and parents around that. That's my thoughts.
A couple of thoughts too, if there.
I can address this now, or I can wait. Up to you.
Please.
Okay, so the first question about the 9th grade orientation. We are working still, we're still planning on having 9th grade orientation. We would like it to be in person, but the big hold up with that is the transportation, because they'd all be coming in on the same bus, so we're mixing A group and B group on those buses. That's the only glitch in the whole thing. Otherwise, when they get there, we separate them by AB groups and small groups alphabetically, and do a lot of the things we used to do virtually, but also allows small groups to travel separated around the building so they can see where their classrooms are.
So we're still working to make that happen. It's just that one transportation is, if they're all driven in or mostly driven in, you might think that might solve that problem. So that's the one group of the whole day is the bus transportation. As far as the eating, that was our major concern about the 1 o'clock and why we had originally proposed the 12 o'clock. We've worked with food service, so what's going to happen is we still have an advisory period first thing in the morning for that social emotional check-in, where they can have their breakfast. In their breakfast is that power bar and some water for later on in the day, and we've built in about 8 minutes in the class period later in the day, so that it doesn't come out of instruction time. So we have 3 74-minute classes and 1 74-minute class, which looks like 83 minutes on the book, because we put in time for the kids to take that break and have that power bar water to sustain them. Because I absolutely agree, I don't want kids picking at 7:50 in the morning and not eating from 7:30 to 1 o'clock. 100 kids are learning kids.
Thank you, that's helpful to know.
I just had a quick comment also, just to sort of go on record, about my concerns are, of course, with the kids, but also with everybody else in the building. There's so many more people who said it's just the kids, the teachers, janitors, staff, subs, specialists, volunteers potentially, and then probably off the table. Hamilton one has 60 adult staff in the building. And although the risk of exposure to the kids is minimal according to the numbers, and it's not the case for adults. And it became really clear to me looking through the pros of the 4-4 split option. One of the pros is that student contact is between 75 and 100 contacts per day, stable. And teacher contact for risks and exposure is between 56 and 84 contacts a day. And that's a pro. That is not a pro in my mind. That is a huge con. I understand it's a pro as compared to the 8-period option, which is 150 to over 200 for the students and 100 to 125 for the adults in the building. But nothing about that level of exposure is pro. Again, I'm just wondering over.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to call the question.
Okay, we have a motion to call the question, which my Robert's rules is rusty because we haven't had this happen.
Okay, you need a second. Go ahead.
Sorry, you have somebody with their hand up too.
Now, I have a motion to call the question that takes priority over that, whether it was any of you that wanted to speak or anyone else. It's a Robert's rules thing. So, does it require 2/3, Mary Ann, or is it 2/3? So I have to take this motion with no discussion. All those in favor of calling the question, which means voting now. Aye?
Aye.
This is where I need to count, so sorry. I'm an aye. Who else? Aye. Mr. Jones, I saw Ms. Hoskins. Anyone else? That's 3 out of 5, so the motion carries. So we have a vote. So all those in favor of approving the motion on the table, which was to approve option 2 of the high school schedule. All those in favor? Aye? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Mather, I didn't see a hand. Sorry, is a yes?
An aye.
Okay, so unanimous vote yes, correct? Anyone tell me if I misread your vote? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. So next, we need a discussion on the approval of the unbudgeted positions that would be created as a result of our adopting these plans.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since this agenda item has 2 components, I would recommend we deal with, none of them are easier, but perhaps the simpler one. And I will start by making a motion to approve the chairman of the North Kingstown School Committee preparing and forwarding on behalf of the school committee a resolution to the Town Council of North Kingstown for a request for a supplemental funding for the FY21 budget in the amount of $500,000.
I second that.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Jones and a second from Ms. Hildebrand. Discussion.
Oh, that was Jenny.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Hoskins, sorry, it's all video and voice, sorry. Discussion. Okay, I'm just gonna.
I would just say that, I really hope that, we're obviously putting in money. I really hope that the town can help us out so that we can, move through this COVID experience. We've really been working collaboratively. I've talked to, many people, and I just, I'm confident that our town will do the right thing. I really do.
Thank you. And what I'd just like to add is that, in order to do what this community is asking us to do, to keep schools open, to provide the level of instruction that we're looking to do, to have a high school schedule that is as close to what our parents are looking for. I know it's not perfect, but this option is a longer school day, more instruction time, all moving in the right direction, is going to require additional funding. And the town has repeatedly, and members of the town council have come to our meetings and publicly said that we need to let them know what resources that we need in order to get the job done and get what our parents and taxpayers are looking to have. This is that, and this is what we're asking for. And I'm hoping that they will support what we're asking for so that we can implement this plan. It's very clear we said it in the beginning, but I will say it again. The number of parents that have reached out to us asking for these things, whether it's keeping Forest Park open, whether it's trying to keep our class sizes as small as possible, whether it's increasing the high school day and getting more instruction in the high, these are things that haven't even come up yet, which are providing the academic resources that our kids are going to need learning in the environment that we're in. All of these things are things that our parents and our taxpayers are asking for in these emails, and they're receiving them too. So I would implore, people to continue the campaign because the town council ultimately is going to have to decide to fund this. Our problem, and I want to be clear on this, is that we are effectively implementing a plan without knowing what the town council's answer is yet. And we need the council to please schedule a vote on this as soon as possible so that we know what we need to do. Because if we don't have this funding, then we can't do all of these things. And it will mean either rolling back some of these plans, implementing them less than fully. It's going to be a big problem for us. So very much taking them at their word that they're willing to do what we need to do and provide the assistance that we need. That's my 2 cents, and I want to thank them for their offer and hope that we have their support. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? Then hearing none, all those in favor of Mr. Jones' motion, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? I didn't hear anybody else, so passes unanimously. So that is the 500,000 part, and now we need to talk about authority. Well, first of all, our appropriation, which would be to appropriate it from fund balance. Just to make a point for members of the audience, fund balance is essentially our savings account. It's funded with either surpluses from prior years or funds from years before. And I, for one, am always very hesitant to use fund balance to pay for anything that that's going to be a recurring expense. I'm willing to do it here because these positions are not full, going on past this pandemic positions. They're hopefully for a year or less. And that's the reason that I'm willing to use fund balance for that. But it's something we've got to be very careful of because I have to remind everyone on the school committee and members of the public that we still do not have a state budget. We still do not have a funding number from the state. So our state aid, this is for folks who may be tuning into a school committee meeting and haven't followed our whole budget process. Our state aid is a significant portion of the school budget, and it has been made very clear to us that we are not necessarily going to receive the amount of state aid that the state of Rhode Island told us we were going to receive and that we have budgeted. And every dollar that does not come from the state is money that we do not have and that we need to find somewhere else. So I'm cautious and very frankly, slightly concerned. But we also can't wait anymore, because I've heard crazy things that, I've asked the members of our General Assembly when we're going to be hearing budget numbers. They're waiting for the federal government to act. No one knows when the federal government's going to act, and everything is in this gigantic limbo. And here we are on, August 29th, well into our new fiscal year without a state budget and without a firm budget on our end. So it's a scary place to be. And I'm hoping that we don't have to go to the town again. But it is a possibility, and I want to make sure that everyone understands that if there's a significant cut to the amount of state aid that we receive, then this isn't the end of the conversation. So we have to be very careful. So I need a motion, though. I need to know a motion that basically encompasses two things. One is the funding source and also in the amounts, as well as what authority we are giving the superintendent with respect to adding unbudgeted positions to the fiscal 21 budget.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you so succinctly put it, or better than I can, I see it as two distinct items. So I'll start with, I think, the easier one, which is a motion to give, and since folks probably don't know, under the new state law starting 1 January, superintendent does not need to come back to the school committee in terms of the specific hiring of people, just the funding. I would make a motion to give the superintendent a not to exceed amount of $1 million to implement the approved reopening plans for the North Kingstown School District.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And just to be clear for anybody, we're talking about a total of $1 million, which would be the 500 we're hoping to receive from the town and 500 of our own. However, knowing that if we don't receive it from the town, that means we need to either find offsets and reduce things. So I just want to be clear on how that works. So we have a motion and a second. Discussion-wise, I just want to add, I have my own personal priorities that I would like to see when the superintendent implements this. And they're really important. I don't know that they necessarily have to be in, but scalability. And the scalability works both ways. Okay, so what I mean by that is we have essentially two possible scenarios of how this is, three possible scenarios of how this year is going to play out. One is that we just go along as we're expecting and what we're talking about tonight, and we get from now until the spring, and we carry on with this plan. The other possibility is that somewhere along the line things get worse. We end up in a full distance or a partial distance model, and we need to scale back what we're doing. And the third possibility is the one that we're all dreaming of, which is that the clouds lift, the sun shines, and we send everybody back. This plan needs to have that flexibility, and for that reason, I tasked the superintendent with using his judgment, but being cautious in committing anything for long term. I know from my discussions with Mrs. King, as far as funding, there are certain times when we might be able to receive some types of payments. This all needs to play into that discussion as we work on implementing these plans. But I just want to be sure that we're not locking ourselves into something with positions that are inflexible in the event that a month, 2 months, whatever into school, suddenly we're in a full distance learning model. So it has to be a mixture of 1 year only positions, substitute positions that can be added or removed as necessary, and no long-term contracts for things that we can't get out of. So that's my 2 cents there. Any other discussion?
Just one question. Well, can you repeat the motion just so I'm sure that it says what you wanted to say?
Well, okay. So Mr. Jones, can you repeat?
Yeah. Well, I think Ms. Healy could hopefully repeat it, I would think. But I would say that again, I see this as 2 parts. This is simply, and we of course need the superintendent to tell us before we vote that the $1 million will, in his judgment, be able to
execute the reopening plan. But the very fine and wise points that the chairman brought up, I think, are potentially second motion to establish some priorities and operating parameters if the current motion has.
Mr. Jones, I think what your motion is, you're giving the superintendent a not to exceed amount of $1 million to implement the plan, but that $1 million includes the 500 from the town council. Correct?
Well, my understanding would be that we are giving the superintendent within the entire budget that he's been given as appropriated by the North Kingstown Town Council and then developed by and approved by the North Kingstown School Committee after that appropriation, that he needs this supplemental funding to execute this plan. The funding source, we have approved a plan for that. I think within the budget, the superintendent has the ability to execute, and if we do not get the supplemental funding from the town council, then we have a plan to find offsets in the current budget in order to make the reopening plan work.
Okay.
I just don't think that we can, I think our best judgment is that we need both these sources of funding to not only make the plan work, but to preserve the financial stability of the district. Obviously, if the second half, which we don't control, doesn't materialize, we'll have to make some calculated judgments with input from the superintendent and I assume the community before we do that, of how to ensure we also operate within the state law of the balanced budget.
Okay, so did you read back the motion? Do you have it written down? I don't know if you did.
I do have it. So Mr. Jones made a motion to give the superintendent not to exceed $1 million to implement the approved reopening plans for North Kingstown School Department.
Okay, so we're still in discussion here. So the one issue I see with the motion is we haven't identified the funding source yet, so we need to do that. I'm going to make I'm going to make a motion to amend that because I would like to add something to it, which is that I would like to add to the end that the school committee directs the superintendent to prioritize scalability and flexibility when implementing this plan. That is my motion.
Could I say something?
Yes.
I just want to be clear that we understand that we're moving forward and we understand that should we not get the funding from the town council, we will have to come back with recommended financial impact and changes, but we're moving forward with the motion as written.
Well, right now,
we're not waiting for to hear back from the school committee, the town council.
Yeah, so let's deal with one step at a time. So I made a motion to amend. I need a second on that motion. If I have a second. Okay. So now we have a motion to amend. So Mrs. King is making a very important point, which is that the administration, this is why it's so important that the town council gets us an answer as quickly as they reasonably can. But we are essentially committing without the full source of funds. So, and that's where we're at. So I'm hoping that the town council will do that, and you are not incorrect, Mrs. King, that we are in more than a little bit of a pickle in the event that the funding doesn't come through. But I will tell you, our council members have come to us over and over again and let us know that they're there to help us out in this situation. I think the community has spoken. There's a clear need, and I'm optimistic here.
So I guess what I might need, though, is I know this is tricky, maybe not early on, but at some point, I need somebody to say that at this time, we're authorized for, I guess, the $500,000 from our fund balance, and then that can buy us some time to see where we stand with the town council. I guess that's what I need.
Yeah, and
I won't spend it, well, I'm not spending $1 million today, but
right.
We're committing to all of it, and that's my dilemma when it comes to my actual record keeping, if you will.
Yeah. So let's get back to, because I think we can take it in pieces, and I just want to try to keep Robert's rules and all that on track here. So we had a motion to amend, so if there's not any more discussion on that, we can then get back to talking about the main motion and maybe even have to amend it again. But so, any discussion on my motion to amend?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I think your motion's fine. I would just add that we can add additional motions to set the operating parameters and priority for the superintendent. I just think, as I believe Mrs. King pointed out, that it's not, a marriage where one says I do and I don't. We have to reopen the schools, and we have a plan to do it, and we need to have the superintendent execute the plan. So I think we have to deal with the immediate target. We have a plan for ensuring the financial stability of the district, at least in the short run, beyond the next 2 weeks. But we have to open. We have to execute our plan. So I guess my feeling is, the motion is we need to commit and give the superintendent, what he's asking to make this happen. We can talk about the parameters and the priorities as well, but, I don't think we can say execute half of it.
Agreed.
Okay, so we've got to get back to my motion, which is the motion to amend. So all those in favor of my motion to amend? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so my amendment passes. So now we fall back to the full motion. The thing that I see it, Mr. Jones, you didn't say where the money's coming from. So yes, we said $1 million not to exceed, but I think Mrs. King, tell me if I'm wrong, but don't we need to identify where that's coming from at this point?
We do, and that's my issue, because although I obviously will not be spending $1 million on Monday, we are committing the district to moving forward with that plan, and I need a funding source.
Yeah.
Even if that funding source
temporary
changes, right?
Right.
I think Bob said it, and honestly, I think you have to allow us to move forward utilizing fund balance at this point, with the hope that that will get replenished by the town council. I don't see any other way around that, because I can't just put an IOU in our accounting records.
Right. Okay, so, and I'm just going to make one mention, which is that, unfortunately, sometimes my cell phone starts buzzing during these meetings, and I'm not calling out a person, but when members of the public or other people decide that, they're going to chime in during our meeting, which is fine. They only have my number when they know them, but I've gotten some messages from council people saying they're ready to vote on this quickly. I can't speak for them directly, but the signals I'm getting and that my discussions with members of the town council have always been that they are ready to go here, and that we all understand the cautiousness, but they're telling me they're ready to go. So my only question is, do we need to amend that motion one more time just to specifically identify the funding source? And we'd say it's from fund balance. And I think we do.
I would say, Mr. Chairman, that can be a separate motion.
Okay. All right. I'm okay with that. So So any further discussion on the motion on the table? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we need to continue on. So, Mr. Jones, you had some suggestions.
Yes, I would then, although your motion added some additional clarity, but I would say that we should have a discussion, and I guess we need a motion. I'm not quite sure, although I guess it's technically under the agenda item, so I don't know if we need a motion right away. But in addition to your comments about the flexibility, whether we need to give the superintendent some prioritization, given that even though in his best judgment he thinks this is enough, that should it fall short or other things change, that he knows the priorities in which we expect him to use this additional authorization.
Sure. You want to make a motion and set some of those priorities?
Well, I think I might defer to the superintendent to get some input, but, my thought would be obviously we have to fill the instructional capability, then the administrative capability, and then the health and social emotional additional capabilities that superintendent brought forward when he proposed these different options.
Right, so on the slide that I put forward, as Mr. Jones said, we're doing this kind of as we speak right now. And so I do anticipate the need for some administrative support. I see the need for some special education support, social, emotional, but to say that I know exactly the right package and the right, degree to which I need to, add all of these things, that's going to be a priority for us in our planning next week. So don't have every detail down yet, but I just want to assure, Mr. Blasball talked about flexibility and trying to save as much as we can. I agree on those counts, and I'm going to try to do that as much as possible. If I can find a way to, get some of these, teachers from in the school setting where there's an especially low number at a school, and I can move that person to these ranks in order to save some money, I think I'm probably going to have to do that. Our original estimates were for a little bit more than $1 million to get this work done. So we're going to have to find places where we can do that. But I'm going to also prioritize, keeping our elementary in-person classrooms as, as low enrolled as we can. Because, of the priority for having as much space as we can make. So, those are the things that I'm thinking about going forward. I don't know if it's something we need a motion to do or not. I'm just letting you know that's the approach I plan to take. And regardless of the motion, give me, unless there's something else in there that you need me to consider. But you have my assurance that that's my plan.
So, further discussion-wise, I don't know, Mr. Jones, do you want to do that as a formal motion? Do you want to, leave it at that, or where do we want to go?
Well, it might be as simple as, like we do now with the hiring, is simply to ask the superintendent to provide a report back on how he is executing this authority he's been given, so we have a sense of if it's following the motion we just approved with your additional wording, as well as the general priorities that were discussed in approving the reopening plans.
Okay. So the only other item that I see sort of floating out there, and again, it's technical, but I think it's important, and I think it's important for Mrs. King, is we need to just do a quick motion stating that the funds that we just approved are being appropriated from fund balance, with the understanding we're appropriating it from fund balance, but with the understanding that the town council is going to be meeting as soon as possible to take up our request and the resolution that I'm going to send to them. So I'm going to make a very simple motion that the funds that we approved for $1 million, again, it's a total of $1 million. It's not $1 million if we get 500 from the council, it's $1,500,000. So it's $1 million will be appropriated from the school department fund balance at this moment. That we have to have an answer to that.
Seconded.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Now, and I'm just going to make the point that, that would, we don't want to leave it there. So, okay. Any other discussion on item E, which is the unbudgeted positions and implementation of plans?
Mr. Blasball?
Yes.
I'd just like to mention, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to come out today and for the school committee and making these decisions. I know they're not easy. We are going to reopen the survey for distance learning. Starting this afternoon, everyone will get an email and a robocall letting them know. So if any of the decisions made today have changed anyone's mind that they want to get into the distance learning academy, you will have till Monday at noon. And one of the reasons that I mentioned, we have a job placement ceremony, our placement process being conducted Monday at 3, which is incredibly late. We normally do this, weeks in advance of the school year, and we have a professional day on Tuesday, and we're doing this on Monday. So timing is everything. And so you'll have an opportunity to get in if you're not there yet, and any decisions or discussion made today make you think you want to be in. A lot of parents have written to me saying, I don't know if I can select to be in if I don't know the governor's decision. And now the governor is making a decision at 1 o'clock or at least, broadcasting the decision. But I want to be clear, those are two different things. If you select for the Distance Learning Academy, you're basically committing to a semester of having that as your situation. Because change plans, if the governor on Monday comes out and says, we know we're going distance learning at least for the first semester. And then we would change course and everyone would go back to the original classroom. Any other decision is a temporary one. She could say, we're going to go distance learning for the first 2 weeks, and then we're going to go into full. And that would present us right back where we need to be, and now we'd have to exchange a whole bunch of people if they went, with their original classroom at first, and now they're going to another situation. So this will set that up firmly for one situation for everyone who chooses it. And the governor's decision doesn't have as much play anymore. So I just want to be clear, because some people have asked me about that. That is coming your way this afternoon.
And I just want to add, the reason for having to make that decision and the commitment, it's important. It's not that we're trying to be difficult for people. It's not that we're trying to cause angst for people. It's just we're assigning teachers, we're assigning classrooms, we're hiring people. It's not something, make that decision. It can't just turn up on a dime back to the way it was. And that's the only reason that we're making that a requirement. So any other discussion? If not, we've reached the end of our agenda. Then I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion from Ms. Hoskins.
Second.
From Mr. Jones. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.